Hey, everybody. Sorry that it appears that I'm late. I wanted to schedule it for 11:45 or so, but you can't actually do that, and then you can't schedule it for 12 at all, really, unless I guess you can. You would have to say tomorrow at midnight or whatever. So I didn't do that, but here we are. Um, and I'm joined by my friend Derek, who goes by Spacepan, who, if you watched the stream that I have saved with Cassie J and Janice Fiamengo and Sage Gerard and Lex Gore and Karen McFly. Was there anybody else?
Yeah, you got them all. I think you got them all.
Okay.
Janice, Lex, Karen, you, and Sage.
Yeah, so he hosted a screening of The Red Pill at a men's center in Minneapolis.
Yep.
So, yeah, he is a gay guy who is, how would you describe yourself?
Um. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a lot of labels that I think fit, and then there's labels that I like to use. Like I
Yeah,
think,
right?
anti-feminist fits. I guess egalitarian technically fits. Um, Although I guess in some ways traditionalist fits too, because I think they make some good pragmatic arguments. But I would say that primarily the ANCAP style of libertarian plus an MRA.
Okay. So I am somewhat similar, not so much of an ANCAP, a little bit, definitely a cultural libertarian, as is sort of, one of the new popular phraseologies for people in our kind of camp. But I'm not really sure how I lean economically because honestly, I think that so much is going to change within the next 10, 15 years that I like to, be on the right side of history in terms of wealth redistribution, because I do think it is going to have to be a necessity, though maybe not as soon as so many people are saying. Um, so, yeah, but what I want to talk to you about tonight in particular is so I'm having a little bit of not a crisis, but I'm starting to question my usage of the term MRA. Personally, and it's not that I have anything against MRAs. I side with them and everything, but I don't know if it's where I'm most effective in terms of advocating for men's rights. Because if you think about men's rights, just the phraseology, it's mostly probably referring to family court stuff as well as sexual assault and rape allegations. And those are the areas where mostly men and boys are suffering from, or mostly men, but I guess some underage people occasionally are suffering from their rights literally being trampled on by the state. And when I think about my own personal advocacy, I'm more than happy to speak about those issues if it comes up and like bring up some statistics and some personal anecdotes from people that I've heard about. But ultimately, for me as a gay man, I am a lot more I feel a lot more drawn. It's like a little bit more of my calling to speak about the gender specific issues affecting men and boys, such as suicide and the fact that they're falling behind in every level of education, because that's something that I have a lot of personal experience with as an individual, and I can really relate to because I grew up in a very feminist environment in Seattle, and felt like I really did get dicked around by being a male. So, um, one of the like that's something that I can totally just speak to about my personal issues, and I think a lot of gay men could relate to those things. And I think that so much of the greater MRM is powered by, and not to say that this is a bad thing, but it's very probably more often than not, people get into men's rights due to being dicked around in family courts. And they're like, whoa, this is a serious, serious problem. I need to do something about it because it happened to me. And so much of the power behind the men's rights movement is based around that motivation of people who started from that place, which is totally understandable. But then you think about, you know, people who um, could benefit from men's rights, and it's endless, or not men's rights, but having issues, having people pay attention to the gender specific issues of men and boys, and it's endless. And gay men are definitely a big part of that. And if they could only realize that it's not just some guys who are pissed off because they have to pay child support, it is things that affect them too. And I want to try to come up with some, maybe brainstorm a little bit about some ideas about how we could expand the sort of the greater MRM to include more of that. And if there's like, do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, actually, there's kind of a lot to unpack there. There's a few different areas I can kind of see that going in, because like you're right that there's a lot of reasons that people have kind of ambivalence towards the term MRA, and part of it, and I don't know if this is exactly necessarily super relevant right now, but the whole idea of like that it's rights, that really clashes with anybody who subscribes to more of like the negative conception of liberty. Is my volume okay, or should I lean in more?
You should lean in a little bit more.
Okay. Well, but basically, anybody who has like a negative conception of liberty, which is very much kind of the libertarian approach to things, right? That your right to swing your arm and someone's face, that you don't need to explicitly establish every single right, and that when we start talking about rights, there's that danger that then people say, well, this isn't an explicitly listed right, therefore you don't have the right to do it. But then there's also this weird divide between legal rights and then social attitudes. And when you use the terms men's rights, like I think you do make a good point that the implication is kind of that we're talking about legal equality, and that it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a more encompassing enough term, I guess.
Yeah, and like you think about like gender specific healthcare, which there's tons of gender specific healthcare for women. Like if you Google search women's healthcare, you find a bunch of shit. But there's nothing like that for men, pretty much. And that's something that's actually obviously really moment, but that's not a right necessarily. Like if especially if you're a libertarian, like you don't necessarily need those things to be out there, but there should be advocacy so that there maybe is going to be more of them in the future because it's needed. So,
well, and that's the thing too, is that like when with libertarian, like for example, I take on a lot of positions contingently. Like the way I see it is, men are paying the vast majority of the taxes. So if we do have this money being given to women through special programs, to me, it's like, you know what? If we're going to grant that, then yeah, like let's do something for men also, given that they're paying for it. But there's also a counter argument that we can't just take the women's movement and all of the funding and all of the free shit we give to women. We can't just my-tote that. We can't just like create a domestic violence shelter for men for everyone for women. Like we can't. Like it's not as society will collapse. This is something that Karen Scott had pointed out, and then it leads into this larger conflict that Razorblade Candy, he was making videos back in like 2013, 2014, I think, and earlier than that too. But one thing he pointed out was he said, a lot of libertarian MRAs are hypocrites, and they're just latching themselves onto the men's rights movement because it's a way to shit on government and to try to get rid of, all of this like gynocentric extra bullshit for women. So yeah, there's a lot of directions that kind of goes in, and it does kind of put you in an awkward space. But I guess the way I see it is, people have the right to, I guess, fairness and equality in one sense. And I think that from there, you can kind of make the argument that, look, if we are going to have special health funding for women, like there should be something, reciprocal for men. And maybe that means that, I don't know, people always say like, it's not about taking stuff away from women, but it's kind of like, I mean, shit, they're bitching about sexist air conditioning and manspreading and now man existing.
But don't you think it also okay, but don't you think it also doesn't have to necessarily be tax dollars. Like, what about
Absolutely not.
private?
Absolutely not.
Yeah, like what about
100%.
private
Mhm.
enterprises? Like, if we just started, if we got it into universities, like encouraged people to raise awareness in psychology and medicine departments in universities, that like there are very specific gender specific issues that men and boys are suffering in terms of mental health and therapeutic counseling and stuff like that. And you could go into business for yourself researching these issues, and you could actually make a lot of fucking money probably if you opened up a men's mental health clinic in your area, you know. And that's why I say it's different than like rights. It's more like me advocating for just a general social attitude shift.
Well, yeah, and this is something that like I know that Ben Shapiro's pointed it out, as well as I forgot his name, but it was a recent guest on a Molyneux podcast. He was super young, but they were pointing out like once you have the government providing more things, it erodes like the heart of society. Like there used to be more of this idea that you had an obligation to your community and that you would voluntarily contribute to it. And there was more of that interplay between people socially, and the welfare state completely eclipses that because people assume, oh, well, it's the government's responsibility. And then over time, we lose it. We lose the ability to be a society that way. And then we've never really, I don't think we've had a society that was built like as it was right now that we've then come back from. I guess some people point to like larger cycles, but I don't know. It just seems like, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there.
Oh, no worries.
But I
So
think you completed the thought.
yeah, I think I'm sort of more or less.
I'm a
uh
couple hours behind. Yeah, it's already 2 here.
oh,
That's
okay.
cute.
My friend Thorn in the chat, she said that she thinks that people would, or is she the who say that? Someone said, maybe it wasn't her, that they would protest if they had men's mental health clinics. But what I'm thinking is that it could be, if we just got it through the heads of the establishment of medicine and psychology and stuff, psychiatric medicine, blah blah blah, that there needs to be a gender specific focus on men and boys, because it's obviously a problem, and feminism is actually counterproductive. But that wouldn't even really have to be the message. It would just be these things that people probably like. Uh, People always say, why do MRAs attack feminism? Well, like what if we just made it very, very clear that certain people should be specializing in gender specific male issues. And then these people opened up a mental health service center that was, supposed to be for men. And these are not feminists. And women could come if they wanted to, go to the place that specializes in male issues. It wouldn't be only for males, and it would be private, you know? I feel like that would be a good way to make money. And then if you had to, you could try to convince the government to potentially fund individual, because we do have um a lot of people are getting free healthcare and stuff. We could convince VA offices to fund people to go to that clinic and stuff. And yeah, I'm sure feminists would try to stop it because they want to control everything. That's sort of their thing. But I don't know if they would necessarily have that good of a luck protesting it forever. But maybe they would. I don't know.
Part of it, like a lot of the wind in their sails, I think, would come from things being hosted on a public venue or in like a public university. So I think that it's a really bad look, to protest a private charity, I think. And I think that even, I was going to say even they can tell that's bad optics, but I think that might be a little bit too charitable. I don't know. Um, I don't know. It seems to me though that they're losing. So I'm hesitant to say it because I understand that like everybody thinks that feminism is going to die next year and has thought this for the past like 30 years or whatever. But like it's just so hard to imagine them coming back from, especially the most recent attitudes and like the identity politics and the critical standpoint theory. Like I've seen this article circling around on Facebook from like the most kind of reasonable of the leftists who haven't gotten pissed at me and like blocked me or whatever for being a cunt. I'm not saying that they're wrong to block me. Like people, I'm shocked they haven't. But
Yeah.
um, this article though, it's all about, it's kind of a strategic article talking about like, you know, how the left kind of lost its soul, and it seemed like pretty reasonable. And a big part of it is, you know, like you let these ideas overrun the universities. You know, you let this narrative that postmodernist professors are, you know, screwing things up. I mean, that was only one element of it, but like even among the left, and I think that that's part of the issue with you know, Alam Bukhari. I think it was he was the one who coined the term cultural libertarian. It seems like the reasonable half of the left is always running away from like everything else on the left, and that's why they constantly have to change labels and change terms. I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, it does seem like that.
This
Um
is something I wanted to get back to though. Like I had a note down about, you mentioned earlier that like with the men's rights movement, one hurdle is that, I mean, it's kind of like a double-edged sword, is that so much of it is based in people's past experiences. And like that was something that I noticed really, really vividly when I went to a Voice for Men's international conference, was I was talking to these people and so many of them had just like crazy stories. And then it really dawned on me that like not a lot of people got to do what I did, which was like, I'm kind of durdling around on the internet and then a lot of these issues fall in my lap and it's really interesting.
yeah, that's what it was with me.
Emotional wake up call that like this isn't just like stuff that's interesting. Like for some people, this is like their life, and like anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I was able to kind of, get into it. It was such a weird thing cuz like I think about it in terms of myself getting involved in the men's movement. I actually it did have to do with my life. Like I have family members who are pretty hardcore feminists, but like it was kind of one of those things where like they purposefully I think that they purposefully tried to like not actually tell me about feminism because they knew that like if I knew about it, I might start to think it was fucked up. And so as long as I was like kind of siding with them in terms of certain things, they would just avoid talking about it. And so it was kind of like hiding in plain sight for me for my whole life. And I should have finally just looked into it. And then the second I really did and like looked into the criticisms of it, then everything was so clear. Uh, and but yeah, it's definitely a threat to feminists to realize that people who, as Milo always would put it, don't have a dog in the fight are starting to get into it anyway. Like either women or gay men or, transgender people are looking at this and seeing like, wait, feminism is really abusing people, probably straight men the most, but basically everybody, if you include the emotional damage that feminism has on young women, if they're thinking that 1 in 5 of them are going to get raped on a college campus, that's a very damaging thing.
And the pay gap too. You know, telling them that no matter how hard you work, you're gonna get 77 cents on the dollar just
Yeah.
because vagina.
Yeah.
Like, what a whole. It's just like, and that was one thing that oh shit, I forgot who it was, but she was like, when I learned the truth about the pay gap, and she was like, I had this like resentment when I was at work, and I realized that was all unnecessary and it was all based on a lie, and she was pissed. Like, it's like, yeah, I don't understand why more women don't like wake up that way too. I mean, a lot of them do, like obviously, so credit, you know, where it's due, but it's crazy. So much of the stuff is so surface level. Like if you just ask the first freaking question, the whole thing just unravels. And for me, what's really profound is why? How did we get into this mess? Because I think it reveals a lot about human nature, and like that's where a lot of people, I think, miss the deeper part of the conversation, and they just kind of dismiss gynocentrism as a gender flip patriarchy theory. But like, I don't know, how else do you explain how we got into this mess? Like, how else do you explain that we have all this inordinate amount of care and concern for women's issues and virtually none for men?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the Aaron Pizzey story illustrates it pretty well. Like these were people who ended up using this concept of the patriarchy as a kind of a PR move to raise money for their own, little wing of gender activism. And then slowly but surely they just infested every part of the Western left over the course of 40 years. And the thing is that they were able to do that. And the whole time, in so many words, they said, "Oh, don't look at me. I'm just a girl. Don't look at me. I'm not doing nothing. I'm just a girl. Girls are, we're not treated the same in society. So, I don't look at me. I'm just a girl." While they were building this massive corrupt empire, and so they were able to get away with it for a very, very long time, based on this, just honestly, because they were using sexism to their advantage. And then what happened, and this is why I think that it is going to be a turning point. They finally attempted to use their massive army that they kind of that was hidden in plain sight, which was um the hyper gynocentrism that feminism pioneered. Only 5% of feminists actually knew anything about it, but a mammoth amount of people were at least influenced by it. Like I still talk to people fairly frequently who tell me, "Oh, I don't identify as a feminist," and I'm like, "So do you dislike feminists?" And they're like, "Well, I don't know," and I'm like, "Well, what about male suicide?" And then they say, "Oh, yeah, I mean, I've heard that it's 78%. That's true, but like, I mean, that's just because women attempt suicide but fail more often." Like that, those things have been programmed into them, and they still say them, and they still, but they don't consider themselves feminists. Like, so feminism has this, stranglehold on the Western left and even parts of the right. And it was able to do that and brainwash all of these people into not investigating further, because, oh, they're just, don't look at me, I'm just a girl, I can't do anything wrong. But they did in 2016, and in Germany, with Angela Merkel and stuff. In 2016 they tried to officially take over the world, and they were finally put on center stage, and thank God they didn't win. you know so it is potentially going to be more of a turning point, but I think they're trying to do a lot of damage control now, and trying, but enough people were woken up to it. And um I don't know if, I have so many young people on my channel who leave comments. I didn't realize how young people were until I started like inquiring about their ages, kind of. And then people were like, "Oh, I'm 13," and shit. Um, so, but like, but I don't have a lot of them. I would say mostly people on my channel are over 18. But feminists will, fight to the bitter end to claim, "Oh no, this was just about equality. This was just about standing up for women's rights." I don't know if that's going to work on anybody who isn't already, hasn't already put in all their money on feminism. Like, I don't know if that will work anymore. Like, they can't just like deny that the Clinton election never happened and that she didn't try to fucking say vote for me because vagina over and over. Like that, we all know that happened. So
Yeah, no, God, and like, well, that's the thing though, is that I do feel like non-feminists, non-anti-feminist people who are kind of in that middle ground, maybe they don't care. And I can respect, someone saying like, "I'm not really interested. This shit's really, really thorny. I don't want to." I respect that people should be allowed to have that kind of a, space. Otherwise, you're kind of getting into original sin territory. But like for people who are engaging and talking about gendered issues, I just don't think it's defensible to be anything but a straight up anti-feminist. The same way that virtually everyone is anti-Nazi. Like it's just and that's why I think the gynocentric angle of it is really helpful because non-feminists and a lot of anti-feminists are still extremely gynocentric, and they're not fighting the underlying battle. And like with the Aaron Fitzy story, like one element of it that's really important is that they needed to get funding for this, right? And if it was only for women, then it was easier for them to get funding from like rich male donors. If it was something that was gender neutral, it was harder to get donations. And this seems to have been the case, as far as we can tell, that anytime you have an issue and you say it's just for women, people are way more likely to support it. Like another great example of that is in Canada, they have the missing Indigenous, what is it? It was like missing and murdered Indigenous peoples uh, what's the word for it? Like it's not a campaign, but it's But anyway,
I know
but
what you're talking about.
yeah, the vast majority of the victims of that are male, like the vast majority, and the entire thing is for women. And like this has been pointed out, and they just keep going along with it. It's just this weirdly openly bigoted thing, just like out in plain sight because it's like fucking Canada. Like
Yeah. And same with the Boko Haram.
Boko Haram. That's honestly like that by itself just encapsulates everything. Like because it wasn't just this like it was a fucked up gynocentric crazy thing when you just look at the events as they happen like over in Africa. But then when you also go at that extra layer and look at the Western response to it, it proves it from the Western perspective too. So it shows the predominance of gynocentrism across the fucking board from the first all the way down to the most shittiest places in the world.
Yeah.
And like I just feel like a crazy person because like there's this weird resistance when these issues are brought up, and I never experienced that. Like for me, the first time I heard some of Karen Strawn, I was like, "Wow, that was really interesting. I want to find out what feminists think about this." And then I got my head bitten off. Like, and I totally
Yeah.
didn't anticipate that because I was so naive. But
Yeah,
most
yeah, yeah.
people,
I was
they
naive too.
intrinsically, yeah, they get like offended or something. And I don't get it because I never experienced that. And I think that's why I don't know. Like, I'm just like I'm weird that I got really into this shit.
I think that the thing is I think that the thing is this. If somebody has to become curious naturally. Well, okay, a gay guy. Okay, so we're talking about gay guys. That's all we can. This is the personal is political tonight because that's so because I think you and I are kind of
Stop saying on topic. I'll try. We'll try. We'll gay it up a little.
well, no, because no, you're talking about your experiences, and I'm talking about my experiences. So I was kind of the same I became heavily critical. Okay, I always knew a lot of feminists, and I always knew when they would get all feministy, I always knew that there was something wrong with it because it was like I really don't think it's all that much worse for you. Like I think about my sisters and stuff. One of them who's a big feminist, and she's an awful, awful person. And it was just kind of like every time she would talk about being a woman and blah 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 blah, it seemed so melodramatic, and I always was able to be like, well, I don't know, I feel like being a boy, blah blah blah, and she'd just be like, well, you're wrong. You're wrong. And she was older than me, so so I was always like I always had that sort of skepticism in me, but I never really decided in my head that I was right and she was wrong and she was just a delusional narcissist. Um, it was just kind of more like, oh, that was a disagreement that I had with my sister. Uh, I sort of kept it neutral. I was like, well, I don't know what it's like to be a woman, which I'm sure she used to tell me all the time, every time I used to, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I was like, well, but I'm a gay guy, and like, I risk getting beat up. Like, my lesbian friends don't have to worry that they're gonna just get randomly beat up. Because, I went to school in the fucking hood, and it's like, I would go to the bus stop and have to worry that maybe there was some gangster type guys that would want to beat me up because I looked kind of gay. And that was a legitimate worry that I knew that the females that I knew didn't have to worry about in the same way. And so it was always just this kind of thing where it was like, okay, I'll take your word for it with that it sucks to be a woman, but I always knew it sucked to be a gay dude. as well. And it never even really occurred to me to think about how much it would suck to be a straight dude, just to be perfectly honest. And then I finally, it really was this election when I started investigating, because I was a Sanders supporter. And I I was I was wanting to take down Hillary Clinton and her campaign just because like the more I learned about her, she was just an awful candidate. And they started attacking me for being a misogynist. And so I realized that like all of their shit was coming from feminism. Like feminism was like the main force that was the Hillary Clinton campaign. So I was like, well, if I'm gonna advocate for Sanders, I'm gonna have to know my enemy. And so I started learning more and more about feminism, and also I had some really bad run-ins within that past year, so I had already been learning about it. And the more I learned, the more it seemed shitty. And then I was already open to potentially learning about men's issues. But I guess I had to be thoroughly convinced first that feminism was awful, which I did by I like most people when they want to learn about feminism, they ask a feminist to tell them about it, which is so stupid. That's like, hey, if you wanted to learn about Christianity, would you go to the church down your block and ask the priest to tell, it's like, no, that's not how you learn about Christianity from the fucking salesperson. Like, that's not. But I did do that, and I read countless feminist blogs. Like, I started reading, feministing, everyday feminism, Jezebel, fucking feminist, everything that you can imagine, and I think I sort of did a Christina Hoff Summers where I was like, well, where's the counter argument? Where's the counter argument? Because I know that some of this is not entirely true. Like, I know that you're leaving things out. What about female privileges? What about, and I could find articles about how there were no female privileges, but I could never find an article that just admitted, yes, there are female privileges. And, looking back on it, it's like, the fact that I wasn't even able to think of like what some good female privileges were when I was like reading, it's like, wow, I was just really really fucking naive, because it's like there's so it's like all you have to do is say ladies first. That's a fucking privilege. Shut the fuck up. Um, and when I finally got to the men's rights movement, I was hesitant to look at them because the feminists had thoroughly indoctrinated me into like thinking that I'm not supposed to look at them because they're misogynists. But once I did, I was completely open-minded. Like I maybe I was expecting them to be misogynists, but then I was like, no, but they're not. Like I never had a moment where I was like recoiling, but I had to get to that point. Like I had to go towards it myself. And I think that, when when you are that naive and somebody confronts you and say, hey, by the way, everything you know is wrong, that seems like an attack. And I think that that's what happens when people like us try to engage with, either feminists or just people who are brainwashed by the gynocentric everything, those people, the blue pill people. When you try to like inform them of something and they don't want to hear about it, they take it as an attack on their worldview, and that seems very, what I mean.
Well, yeah, and it's uncomfortable to have to pull the rug out from your entire worldview and have to redefine everything because that's a lot of freaking work.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
especially if somebody else is initiating that process,
yeah,
you know, like if you have to clean a room, it's gonna feel like 100 times worse and more of a chore if someone else is making you do it than if you just kind of like get inspired one day and feel like, yeah, this is something I want to do.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, one thing I've noticed is some people have like more kind of gradual red pillings, which kind of sounds like your experience that you questioned things along the way and noticed things were weird. Like I had one that was a lot more like a black and white thing because like I don't know, I grew up in suburbs and like generally didn't walk around, was never really exposed to danger, had a pretty kind of mellow sort of existence, and like have always been a really kind of accommodating sort of person, and then I had a couple of kind of thought terminating cliches in my head, about like individualism, right? That we should never make any generalizations about people, you know, and things like that. It's just, and like there's truth to it in that people are all individuals and should be judged individually, but like it's ridiculously reductionist to not like be allowed to make generalizations, and because of that, like my brain, like I wasn't making judgments about gender or about race or about anything. Like I was just kind of shutting that off. So then when I went to college, I noticed that, you know, there's all this talk about privilege and all this talk about this, and I would kind of try to be sympathetic and hear it out. But then what I would notice is that there wasn't really any reciprocity in terms of other identities that aren't considered oppressed, which is what a lot of people notice, right?
Mhm.
I remember I was in a philosophy class and I asked the professor, like, well, with intersectionality, like if my race and my gender, my orientation, like all these factors all are an aspect of my identity and they all intersect. The fact that I occupy this space right now at this moment is part of that identity too, right? And what I ate for breakfast is another part of my intersecting identity, and whether or not I know how to knit, that's another aspect of my identity, and I don't. Like what kind of beer I drank last Sunday, like that is another kind of right. So ideally, if you took every single characteristic and then enumerated them all out and took account for all of them, intersectionality at its actual logical final conclusion is just individualism. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and
Oh,
once you
and that shouldn't be that hard to figure out. Like,
yeah,
like the second I started, the second those fuckers forced me to think about it, I was like, well, then yeah, exactly. It becomes individualism.
well, see,
Yeah,
I
intersectionality is like the most bigoted, generalizing. It's a massive amount of sweeping generalization disguised as individualism. It's like it's one of the biggest cons ever.
yeah, because that's the thing is like, in theory, it could be used or applied in ways that are useful, but like it would have to be so many caveats and so like measured, and it would have to be supplemented with so many other perspectives at the same time to the point where like that it's used as this kind of like dogmatic be all end all. It's just like not helpful or useful. But like the irony is like in the men's rights movement, like we do a better job at intersectionality by pointing out like black male issues because SJWs tend to just see that as a black issue.
Yeah.
And
Oh no, they'll say it's worse for women. Everything is worse for women. And
yeah,
if you
it makes
point
no
out that
sense. Yeah.
black men are the ones who are getting fucking murdered and shit, by either police or civilian, there's fucking intersectional feminists who say literally that black women get murdered all the time, but the media doesn't report on it. Like that would be somehow possible.
Well, and I think it was Now infamously had a false stat on one of their websites about black women being murdered at like it was that the number one cause of death for black women is like being murdered by their spouses, something ridiculous like that, and it was just like completely just like baseless and retarded. But like, ah, shit, what was I gonna say?
We're talking about the flaws of intersectionality and
Oh,
individualism.
that's right. So do you know what that professor said when I brought up this question? What her answer was? It's a great answer. She's probably the best feminist I ever met. She said, when it comes to intersectionality, we care about differences that make a difference.
Oh, so you're being sarcastic. That's fucking crazy.
No, no, it's not. It's not crazy because the idea is that, you draw the line when the characteristics stop being important. So, like, your breakfast is less important than your race. Like, that's acceptable, right? It doesn't quite work as a standard by itself because there's a lot of places you can draw that line, obviously. But the issue is then, okay, like maleness should matter more. So I think when she said that, in practice, all these feminists, if they want to say differences that make a difference, in practice, it's differences that make a difference to them. And what their advocacy says in its actions, or what I should say is what their activism says, is that maleness does not matter to them, at least not in terms of helping. In terms of blaming, sure,
Yeah.
we all know that, but
So here's the two things I wanted to kind of run by you. I want to come up with a potential. Okay, and these kind of go together. I want to potentially start a network of anti-feminist gay guys or feminist critics. I don't like the label anti-feminist because like I'm not a Christian. Would I be an anti-Christian? It's just weird.
MR gays.
Yeah, MR gays or something, but then that has the men's rights in it, and I want
But
to.
it's funny.
It's
Pros and cons, just throwing it out there.
yeah, yeah, no, I know. Um, but like, I want something. Okay, so I was thinking, we could have an acronym that would be like, the first two letters I got was homosexual objectors. Um, it would be like homosexual objectors to something something. It's like homosexuals objectors to feminists and gynocentrism or something like. So like it would be like ho fog or something like ho fag.
Oh,
That wouldn't
oh,
be that good.
it's like the Thundercats. Oh,
Yeah, or something. I don't. Yeah, no, so I don't have a good one, and but I want to, and it could be kind of like a gay version of the honey badgers, but because
I'm good at thinking this stuff up. People think that Hannah Wallen is the pun master because she is,
mm,
but I'm gonna give that bitch a run for her money.
mm,
I just
because
gotta think a little.
I already have a few people. Like I have my friend, the Liberal Hammer, and our friend Very Valen. Very Valen is very conservative to the point where I don't know if um I don't know if focusing on a kind of a gay version of men's rights um would be a big focus because he's like kind of a trumpeter, I guess is the thing, and to the point where it's kind of like almost like conflicting interests, because it's like the trumpeters are sort of like there's definitely gay guys who are into it, but they don't talk that much about being gay, and I would like to talk about being gay. I would like to be like, this is important for gay men, and here's why. And so I don't know if Valen would be into it, but I think the Liberal Hammer would be into it. And you're starting to make videos, and I can get more people as time goes on. But I think it would be really great because I would really like to start taking back LGBT. Um, by the way, Doubting Tommy gave me $5. Says it's not that much, but I hope this helps. Thank you very much. It does very much. So I want to be able to start trying to take back over, or just lend help to taking back LGBT type organizations, getting the fucking feminists out. It's because there's there there could be a lot of support for young gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans people, and it's all being wasted on fucking feminist indoctrination. Like I have so many subscribers who are young, people who are LGBT, GLBT, whatever the fuck you want to call it, and they tell me that they would like to go to some sort of gay straight alliance or something, but they went to it at their school and it's all fucking transgender feminists, and they don't feel like it's helpful at all. And it's like that's fucked up. And then if you go to any sort of activist type place, any sort of not necessarily like an activist place, but like a place that focuses on um homosexual and transgender and transgender issues in a city like Seattle or San Francisco, you're going to get one of two things generally. Either it's going to be gay male focused and it's going to really revolve around HIV and AIDS in a lot of ways, or it's going to be um, feminist. And I don't really see. Oh, by the way, Christopher Woodhouse gave me $5. Free gay thinkers. Thank you very much. That's the FGT. We might need something a little bit more roll off the tongue than that. FGT is kind of so, but I do like that. I do like that. So I won't. Okay. I remember back in the day, there used to be a little bit of an overlap between queer and gay. And granted, the label queer has always been kind of a feminist thing, but not always too much. Like they weren't overbearing with it in the way that they got over the past 4 or 5 years, especially. But over the past 4 or 5 years, it became a fucking man hating goddamn thing. And if you called yourself queer, but you were a cisgender male that was gay, you had to be like putting glitter in your beard or something. Like it was this weird thing like that. And it's always started, now that I think about it in more depth. And I don't know if you had the same level of like full blown scenester hipster that I, have in my life. But
No, no, I just dress like it. I just dress like it and then just like hang out on the internet and mostly lurk. Not even shit posting, lurking.
uh, so I noticed that if gay guys are just being tacky and they just want to go to some gay bar with fucking muscle tees on and with stupid 90210 type hair and just be tacky and like, then they'll just ignore them and they'll just call them assimilationist gays, those aren't queers, blah blah blah. But if gay guys start doing anything cool, if gay guys start like throwing shows and like making their own music and like being interesting, then the fucking feminists come and then eventually they try to take over. It's like they can leave us alone as long as we suck. Like as long as we are not interesting. But and even then sometimes they'll try to come take over. But like especially if you start doing anything positive and that's like actually sort of interesting and has some sort of intellectual merit, they want to be a part of it, but then they can't handle this idea that maybe they don't get to be in charge. So what I want is to help pioneer a culture that appreciates the masculine queer culture, but maybe not call it queer because I don't like that word anymore. But it's like a place for gay men and trans guys to be happy with being men and to like be unapologetic about that and to speak about the importance of masculinity that's not under the feminist lens.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can think of two directions that it can go in. Like because you mentioned earlier, like trumpeters who might kind of be like, I don't want to gay shit up or whatever. Um, that's a paraphrasing, obviously, but the idea was that I'm just so tired. So, oh yeah, yeah. So for example, like one thing people always go to is like gay wedding cakes, right? Or in the gay marriage shit, and like so much of the gay activism really oversteps a lot of the boundaries that a lot of like gay libertarians like myself would actually cherish. Like frankly, I think that if you're a gay person who forces a Christian to make your fucking faggot cake for your wedding, I hope they fucking poison it. Like fuck you. Like because you like are harboring and breeding so much resentment toward gay people by using the government to force them to go along with your shitty agenda. And I remember like with the whole gay marriage thing, I was like, gay marriage is fine, but like if they start forcing churches to perform gay weddings, and that's an issue. And sure enough, that's the shit that's starting to happen like over in Europe and stuff. And like I'll talk to your people who don't even understand why that's an issue. They'll think like, well, why would a church be allowed to discriminate? And it's like, because it's the fucking Bible. It's a disco ball. Like we have to be allowed to let the churches be different. That's the whole goddamn point. Like so
Yeah.
like I feel like from the perspective of like, for example, like a straight person, the kind of person who gets stereotyped as being homophobic, if there were more gay voices saying, hey, like we think that the people who are doing all this gay rights shit, they don't speak for us and they're a bunch of assholes and we don't support them and we support you, like that's one aspect of it. The other angle, one thing that I noticed, like when I was growing up, I had trouble interacting with males. And it wasn't until after I started learning about men's issues and started to see men as people who weren't just agents, but people who could be vulnerable and people who could have legitimate issues, that I then started to empathize and then started to realize, oh, there's more understanding, like, because otherwise, if someone's purely an agent, all you can think of is, oh, I hope they don't do anything to me. I hope they don't try to hurt me. I don't they're not aggressive.
Yeah.
Not until you start to see their vulnerability that you then start to realize, oh, like things can happen to them. Like they have their own, Miko system and their own existences. And then just being able to empathize with some of the things that, like as a gay person, you're immune from a lot of rape accusations because it's primarily a gendered thing, the false rape accusations, as it seems to be. And then you're also immune from teen pregnancy. Like we don't talk enough about gay privilege. We don't talk enough about the fact that if you're raising a kid and they come out as gay, you might have some disappointments, but like realize that statistically speaking, that actually there's a lot of good news. So I guess for me, learning about men's issues was a way for me to be able to interact with straight men without having, I don't know, I guess a sense of like paranoia or whatever. Like I feel like we just have this like androphobia that just I think that some of it is inherent, like intrinsic in some way. I don't think it's all society, but I think that we can overcome it even if it is something that's kind of hardwired. So I see like both directions of it. Like that's kind of two angles of it that I see it being useful.
Sure. By the way, Thomas Miller gave me $100, and he says that he knows I'm working towards a new computer. Hope this helps. I'll take it. Yeah, that'll help. So yeah, thanks a bunch. He actually joined me last night in my live stream. Um, so yeah, I I definitely hear what you're saying about having empathy for straight men, and like I never did when I was a kid because I didn't really have good friends. I had a lot of friends that were straight guys when I was like a really little kid, but they weren't my good friends. They were just kids that I got together and I don't know, like played sports with and did stupid stuff. And um, when I first started to have good friends, they were queer guys. One of them was gay, and one of them was I guess he must have been bi because he ended up being supposedly straight, except for I hooked up with him a number of times when we were like 13. Um, and I don't know, maybe he was just horny. I don't really know. And I can't ask him because he ended up killing himself later in life. But he, uh, yeah, a few years ago. We weren't friends anymore though. So I heard about it through the
So it's okay. I don't give a shit.
yeah.
No, I'm sorry. That's no, but that's awful to hear. I
No,
feel like
no, whatever.
so we can't have this kind of a stream and not, that like that sucks. Sorry, go on.
yeah. Well, those are the people who were the people who were my first friends were queer, and then like I had some good friends that were straight when I was a late teenager, and we had our bonding moments, and it was cool. But there was always this kind of I think it was just them as individuals. Well, no, 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 no. Okay, the two guys I'm thinking of in particular, one of them, both of them seemed like I remember feeling kind of jealous for how, simple maybe things were for them. Being straight guys. One of them in particular, I do think is overall a pretty goddamn privileged person. Just he has a lot going for him. He's now the CEO of his own company that he started. So and he's smart, he's handsome, he's um very sociable, always has been, and we were quite good friends for a while. But he's a good guy. Everybody likes him for a reason. It's not like, um but at the same time, I didn't necessarily ever have to have any compassion for him because like he actually was like this version of like when feminists think about the patriarchy and like, oh, this guy doesn't have any problems, he's kind of like that. Like I don't know, I like the worst thing that ever happened to him was that he dated this girl that I was mutual friends with who didn't end up liking, she like wasn't in love with him and just didn't want to be with him no matter what he did. And he got over it eventually. But like that was about the worst thing that ever happened to him.
You don't know that. You don't know that.
Wait, what do you mean? Well, no, no, no. Oh, yeah,
You don't
no,
know that's the worst thing that's ever happened. Like, you don't know that.
no, 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 no. You're right. You're right. But at the same time, like the worst thing that I remember him bringing up to me, because I certainly heard a lot about his heartache over that one girl. Like he would talk about it. He'd fucking bring it up. I know that there's probably been some other bad things that have happened to him. Don't get me wrong. But at the same time, he was overall just like, you know, because I would probably talk about my issues. Like we were pretty good fucking friends, you know, and we did lots of drugs together when I was like a late teenager, early 20s. I was he went with me to Burning Man. There was like 150 of us, but he was the reason that I went to Burning Man with that camp. Like he was the person that I knew from that specific camp, and he invited me to go with the 150 people. So we talked a lot, you know, and the only thing that, you know, he was mostly like, no, my life is fine. I wish that girl loved me though, you know, like that was kind of, but the other guy that we were friends with, who is, you know, a really good friend of mine, he played it off like everything was cool all the time. Like if you talk to him, everything seems cool, and he's really happy seeming, and he's like such a nice guy, and he's good looking, always had lots of girlfriends and stuff. But he grew up in a fucking cult.
What kind of?
And yeah, he grew up in like a literal actual cult in Japan, some crazy Japanese sex cult. And both,
Wait, no, that's not the really famous one, is
yeah,
it?
yeah, yeah, Children of God, the really famous one.
Oh shit, yeah. Yo,
Yeah.
that shit's dark.
They have wings in other places too. I think
They're
they
still
have,
a thing. Yeah, they're still a thing.
yeah, yeah, no, they're, yeah. I've actually known numerous people who were in it. And so he grew up in that. And then him and his brother moved away in the late 90s. And that's when I met them. And his brother, I actually became friends with his brother first, and then became friends with him. And they're both really, really nice guys, super, super nice guys. And then, but the guy who,
So were they were Japanese Americans then?
they were half Japanese. Their mother was Japanese, joined the cult from Japan, but their father had moved across seas to join the cult or whatever. And
So the cult would still let them move over though.
well, you could get away.
Okay,
It's,
yeah, I
it's
suppose, yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I actually knew another people, and they got kicked out of the cult because one of their uncle was violent, and they got like. So okay, so my one friend and his brother, they moved. They decided we're old enough to move. I think that my friend waited till he was about 20 until his brother was 18, and they were like, okay, we got to get out of here. Fuck this. Like, so they moved back to Seattle, maybe Eastern Washington at first. But uh, after a while, the younger brother didn't do so well, and he ended up committing suicide, as well as actually no, first their mom committed suicide, and then his brother committed suicide. So yeah, RIP. It's a very sad story. But it's interesting because the guy who was in the cult, who's still alive, he is so good at not just seeming strong. It's not even that he tries to seem strong, but like he tries to just seem lighthearted and not like he's sad, you know. And he can open up to me, like he's told me specifically that I'm one of the only people that he can open up to. I guess just because I was one of the first people he met when he moved to the United States, and I something about me. I don't know. People tend to say that I'm good at getting them to open up. Like that's just something that I'm good at. But at the same time, it's like I've never really understood how hard things must be for him. I mean, if your fucking little brother, who was like your best friend, and your mother both committed suicide, that's like about as bad as it gets. So yeah, it's weird, but it's like but he also grew up in a fucking cult, so like how does he tell people about what he's really going through? Like I just think that he has to hide it behind a happy exterior because that's the kind of that's all he knows, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, well, one thing too is like something that Tom Golden points out a lot is that like we're not really tolerant enough of the fact that men and women deal with trauma differently. Like he gives an example of two men, you know, on a fishing trip where maybe they don't talk to each other and they're not even looking at each other as fishing, but that's like a way of bonding and a way of healing. And like that really resonated with me because I found that the way that I get to know people is usually like through something else, through some medium. Like I like to play a game with someone or something like that, or like to have some topic and discuss it with them to kind of have that third point that mediates. Like it's really uncomfortable to do like a one-on-one heartfelt like emotional experience kind of a thing. Like that's not, but like adding the object and that intermediator, whether it's a game or a hobby or just like a topic, whatever, I think is, you know, like I think that the other thing too it ties into. I saw this meme. It was kind of horrible. It was in a Jordan Peterson group where they had it was divided in half, and there was like when you're taking a picture of something you want everyone to see, and there's the male one and it just says object, and the female one is like a selfie with the object behind her face, you know. Right? And I feel like so much of, and I think this is also part of the reason that you see the Scandinavian paradox is that like male brains and in general male interests, in addition to you know males' styles and ways of grieving, it's kind of ridiculous to think that like men can think a certain way and function a certain way and be geared toward a certain job, which is like a third of your life. They can be geared and predispositioned toward all that, but that then it would not also manifest itself in the way that men grieve and talk about problems. Like you look at the Scandinavian paradox, it's like men are better at working with objects and ideas and more removed things, and women are kind of better at doing some of the more human service things. Like those stereotypes tend to be true. That tends to be what men and women prefer to do. So yeah, I don't know. Like I guess that's one thing I like to raise more awareness of is just like people shouldn't be shamed for how they want to grieve necessarily, right? Like they should be allowed some space to use different tools and different avenues. I think.
Yeah, did you watch my video, my longest video about feminism and the radical fairies?
Yes, I think I did see that one. Wait. You know what? No, I haven't seen that because you mentioned this story on the Q&A stream, and that's how I know it. But I don't think I've seen the actual full video.
Okay,
So,
because it's
when did you upload? What month did you upload it? Was it earlier this
I
year?
uploaded it I think on May 1st because May 1st is Beltane, which the radical fairies celebrate. It's like the pagan May Day holiday. Um so I uh that's one of my best videos because it there's a lot of historical background about a specific gay subculture that was supposed to be for gay men and only gay men.
It was a fantastic story, and like I remember especially because I was like, oh, it's a really cheesy question to ask everyone how they are red pilled, and like I got like those are some of the best answers ever. Like,
Yeah, well, because no, because it's a really messed up thing with what happened, and so here's the thing with my I didn't mention this on the stream, but so I've never really been a radical fairy exactly because of the fact that I'm not really a hippie. Honestly, like ultimately, I'm a little bit more of a city, uh, crass intellectual hipster, or like a nerdster, you know, like a legit stir maybe. Like I'm the type of guy who like I like all the fashionable bands, but I also like their all of their influences, and I could name what all their influences are, and you know, like I wear trendy clothing, but I actually got them all at the vintage store and started half of the trends. I was that kind of guy. You know what I mean? Just to be perfectly honest, I prided myself on I wasn't just going to H&M and having the new clothing. I was, you know. Um, and but I went
Yeah,
through
I just want to interject with that's one of the reasons like a lot of your videos are interesting to me because like I've always been more conservative, so to me a lot of the gay culture shit was just like I was just like, oh, this is stupid. I don't like it. So like you kind of dove into a lot of that, and then like had some fallout from it and stuff. So like I just it was like a weird path like I never went down. So it's so even to
yeah, I
me,
call
like,
myself Prince of
so, like
Queens for a
I don't.
fucking.
Yeah, like I have to watch your videos to learn what the gay experience is. I don't know what it is otherwise.
I get a lot of that. A lot of people tell me that they're like, "Yeah, you're the person who explains what it's like to be gay," and it's like, okay. No, because like I was a musician and a theater maker, mostly working with gay gay men for the most part, and um, like it was a weird thing because it wasn't always great. I had my weird moments that were awkward, and when I used to run in kind of the Burning Man crowd from when I was a late teenager to when I was in my early 20s. And then, Rhea gave me $5. Hey, it's Rhea says, "Hey, been a minute. How you been? Haven't been commented, but still enjoy your videos. Thank you, sister. I appreciate that very much." Um, so I used to run in the Burning Man crowd, and the Radical Fairies have a lot of overlap with Burning Man.
Oh, I can go meet them there. I'm going there next month.
You're gonna go?
Yeah, my sister kind of twisted my arm into it, but no, like, cause she really likes all that stuff and she's really into all that culture, and like I'm more, I feel like I don't have any of that spiritualism, so I'm gonna try to maybe round me some
Don't
up.
expect to find any don't go to Burning Man for the community. Fuck the community. Accept the fact that it's a temporary experience. Do not try to take the experience home with you. Do not try to be friends with the burners in your fucking area. It will only lead to hardships if you do that. Except that it's like you're going to Disneyland, and when you leave it, you leave the experience with it, because if you try to have off playa, the playa is the desert. If you try to have off playa community with burners, it will only lead to miscommunications and drug problems. That's all that will happen. I went to Burning Man in 2003, and I even before then I knew tons of Burning Man people because I was a rave DJ starting in 1999 was when I played my first rave when I was 17. So I knew all those kind of people for 4 years before I even went, and then I've known them ever since. So um yeah, okay. So I ended up having a falling out with all of Burning Man culture. Now, granted, I've wanted to go back to Burning Man just because it is fucking fun. Just it is fun. You're gonna have fun as long as you are well prepared. Like as long as you have a good tent, or can stay in someone's air conditioned RV or something is the best.
Yeah, I have a really slick setup because I'm flying in, but my sister's the one going there, and since they're driving, they're just like taking all the stuff for me, so I get to just like with a backpack go in there, and she just like has all the stuff for me.
Oh, that's sweet.
It's
Yeah,
just
but
yeah,
make
it's
sure you
warm,
really make sure to be well prepared though, because like you really are fucking out there. Like have there's a list of essentials that you really really have to have, like having a camel pack, um, hydration system where it's like a water jug that rides on your back with a tube. You have to have that. I didn't have that, and that was one of the biggest mistakes of my life. You also have to get a lot of disposable wet wipes, not just for your ass, but mostly for getting the dust out of your eyes and shit. Things like that. Like but
I
there's
got goggles
lists.
for me. I got goggles for me too.
Yeah, there's
Like that.
lists that's online of what you got to get. But okay, so
It's funny though,
I
those are like two of the first things that my sister mentioned too. It's like
yeah, no, those are two of the most important things. So, but okay, I had a falling out with all of Burning Man culture. That's too long to get into to tell this story. But the I I had sort of kind of in the same way that I trusted feminism. I trusted Burning Man culture as like a good thing. And then I eventually really learned more about it, and I realized that like it's not cool. It's not like as an actual culture, it's not cool. It's just a big fucking party that's fun. And if you try to like turn it into a culture, it will fuck with your life because it's no way to live basing your life around this festival that happens every year. It's and the philosophies that come from it are not sustainable in real life. And you're more of a libertarian, less of a collectivist, so you'd probably learn that lesson quicker than I would. You know,
Yeah,
um,
so they actually are a little bit ANCAP-y in some of them. Like,
some of them are, and some of the ones that maybe can do it right, but like no, dude, you're gonna go there and you're gonna be really surprised by the weird collectivist nonsense that comes from
mhm.
some of those people. They're fucking weird, dude. I'm telling you. Um, and so I decided that I stopped liking Burning Man and I started criticizing it heavily. And then the people that I fell into that I didn't hate were the radical fairies. And the radical fairies were, um although they were kind of collectivist to a certain degree and they were into Burning Man, they were very, very open-minded. And they kind of like when I started talking to them, like I was very bitter at all of Burning Man, and I was like, people, everybody who's like Burning Man type people suck. And then I talked to the radical fairies, and they were like, well, we don't really define ourselves very rigidly. There's no sort of checklist of things that you have to be a radical fairy. The only thing that you really have to be is believe that homosexuality, and in particular male homosexuality, is something positive and maybe even magical that the world needs for whatever reason, and that we should be, as it's we have a responsibility as male homosexuals, um to find meaning in that part of us instead of either feeling ashamed of it or trying to assimilate too much into straight culture. Like we have to accept that we're different for a reason, and that like there's something about us that makes us special, and trying to embrace that. That's the only thing that and that was what it meant to me. And then I didn't become some big radical fairy, but I always valued that. And they saved me from a lot of animosity because I was getting really, really, really frustrated with every aspect of like the West Coast Burning Man hippie raver type scene, you know. And then I found the radical fairies, and I was like, okay, there are some reasonable ones, thank God. And I decided not to totally hate all of it. But then the feminists took over, and they sort of destroyed a lot of most of it. They've destroyed most of it. Um,
And those stories, they need to all be noted and collected because it's a reoccurring theme, right? Like they input there's the atheism plus, there's there's that. You know what I mean? Like there's the whole Gamergate obviously, which is the infiltration of like video games, but then it also happens in music. It also happens in tabletop gaming, and then there was Metalgate at one point. Like it's a reoccurring thing is that they don't create things for themselves. They find some other culture, some other thing, and then they just like infest it and hollow it out because they're feng shuiing it all and making it all.
yeah, no, it was like what I said earlier about how like if gay guys ever start doing anything cool, then they have to try to take it over.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, the radical fairies, and the radical fairies have land, and it was a very, very messed up thing. Why did I think I brought up radical fairies to begin with for some other reason, but that was a really long time ago. Um,
There was something I wanted to add though on like their kind of common denominator idea that like male homosexuality is magic, so to speak. I think that now this I guess this might be like the gay version of race realism or like traditionalism. But so bear we're gonna get edgy.
Are we going to talk about the genetics, the gay
Wow.
gene?
Yeah, right. No. What it? I'm not. That's funny. I found a legit book about the gay agenda, like an all-in homosexual agenda is real book. It's like one of the greatest things I've ever seen. But so Schopenhauer has this like a spiel he does where he talks about women, and like it's funny because like the thing, it's so dated and like it's like so like it's so like unveiled by like just like nakedly states exactly how he thinks women are, right? But like it's funny because it's so stereotypical. But like when I took a step back from it, I realized like for example, one aspect of it is that women like it's kind of like because they don't have the full responsibility that males have, they kind of get to enjoy this childlike state of wonderment, which is why they have this better sense of like nature and art and things. They have this higher capacity for appreciation because they're like less calloused kind of by reality. And
I
I
feel like
feel
that's
like
kind of true.
with gay men though, it's kind of like what you get is like the masculine drive and the masculine approach to things, but like they're like women and that they love sensibilities and things like that, and that's why it's like really aggressive like artwork and like edgy shit and like the whole countercultural doing drugs and shit. Like I feel like it really is like the feminine I guess aesthetic, I guess, the feminine mystique times like the male ambition and the male drive and
Like RuPaul's Drag Race. Do you ever fucking watch that show?
oh my god, that shit's hilarious. Oh my, I'm about to. So, shit. At the men's center, we had an event. Um, this was actually a couple weeks before the Red Pill event, where he was a radio host, and he said that he had like met people who helped produce that show, and he was like, "It's all scripted, 100%." And I'm like,
It is?
no. I'm like, no. What you mean is there's a lot of footage, and then it's like selectively edited down. And he's like, "No, sweetie, it is scripted. It is all
Oh no.
like you just killed so many Santas. There's glitter everywhere. Like so."
Oh my god. I've known a number of
I thought
people
they
who
were
were.
really clever. I thought that if one thing I can trust bags to be clever, but no, it's scripted.
No, because it's fucking
No,
like. It's like fucking America's Next Top Model on steroids.
it's so freaking funny. Oh my god. I only
I
watched
don't think it. No, I find it extremely stressful. Every time I've always tried to watch it with girls, and they're like, I find this really uncomfortable. Like they're like yeah, they say it looks like they say it looks like their worst nightmare. They're like, oh my god, like what if I had to be one of those, like she's imagining like what if all females were like these bitchy gay guys? Like that would be like my worst nightmare. Like
holy
see,
shit.
yeah, Thorn, oh, I can't say her fucking last name. Thorn in the chat says that show makes me anxious. We were just talking about it last night, actually.
I think it's so well because I'm like I don't know I really bother people a lot and push a lot of buttons, but then like I never seem to get upset. Like I'll make angry seeming posts, but like I don't like in person or whatever. Like I don't know. Like I just kind of laugh at everything.
Yeah, I mostly do too, for the most part. It's hard. Yeah, no, that's a really weird thing about me. Okay, so I've basically only existed on the internet for the past 2 years. Like I don't really go out just because I don't like the people. It's not like I went out and got in fights with people, and it was just more like I would go out, try to hang out with people, and I just got this feeling I just don't like these people. And then I found YouTube, and it was like, oh, praise the Lord, I need to just do this all the time. But like, yeah, if you are my friend on Facebook and you listen to my video, okay, my videos, I make myself sound pretty nice, but on Facebook, I'm a fucking cunt. Like, I'm not nice at all when I am in text talking to people I don't necessarily know.
That's pretty accurate, I'd say.
Yeah,
Now I'm reflecting on it, your posts are a lot more. And no, that's yeah. Like when I write in text form, I write like really mean things because like
yeah.
I'll just like write something stated bluntly, but then I'll realize like, oh, I guess if you don't have qualifiers, that comes off really cunty. Whoops. Like
No, I think that you and I have ganged up on a few people before, even like.
no. I think there was one time when I saw like a back and forth where I added a little thing. I think that was like only one. I try not to like if people are having a good
No,
back.
no, it wasn't. Okay, sorry, it wasn't. I don't. When I say gang up, I do not mean that we bullied someone. I do not mean that we
Okay,
did anything unfair, unjust, or cruel. But we did
we're not
double
targeting
team
them.
one or
We're
two
not
people
targeting.
in the past on Facebook. Like there was, like I remember specifically that there was some fucking feminist friend of yours about like a year, because we've been friends on Facebook for a really long time, like over a year, like probably about a year in 3 months or so. I don't really remember, but you had some fucking friend that was saying something, and then you tried to get her to watch. Maybe you posted an article about Christina Hoff Sommers, and and then she was like, "Well, I refuse to watch anything by her." And you're like, "Well, you do understand that that makes her opinion rather worthless, then, doesn't it?" And then I started posting, and I remember that, and I feel like you've done that a little bit on my timeline, but only like once or twice.
Yeah, and honestly, I have like one person, like one friend she's like a diehard feminist, but like I feel bad because she's really not somebody who like really would get much out of like wanting to engage with like strangers on the internet or anything. But she's also like really opinionated and loves to state it. So it's just, but like me and her together are a really funny pair because it's like I'm like this like super obnoxious whiny MRA, and then she's like a well-stoned Democrat who just stepped out of a time capsule from 1995. Like, and I don't know. And when you get the two of us together, oh boy, and people are always like, do you guys have anything in common? And it's like we're like cats. But yeah, like she's a really sweet person, so I always feel bad. But that's like the one time, just like, but like the other feminists who are hanging around on my friends list, who they've I think it's been just like over a year since I've really had many people like come at me on my posts. Earlier on, when I first started discovering the men's rights movement, I would get like people who would kind of flock and then try to attack it. Like one of them was right in the wake of AVFM's conference, and I posted an article about how somebody misrepresented the speech and the work of Dr. Tara Palmatier, right? And like it just like caused this huge like knockdown drag out fucking Facebook fight, and like nobody even read the fucking article I posted. It was just like, guys, like it was so frustrating because they have like all these. I have like it's just masses and masses of links I can show people all these content, but name the issue, and I remember like the best presentations that I can think of all these things, and like I don't know, it's just like there's so much knowledge you can get for free. I don't understand people. I don't understand like people like I don't understand if people don't like watching like a Bane 66 AU video, for example. Like to me, that's like my primary entertainment. Like I love that shit. Like I don't know. I guess I'm speaking to the choir here because everybody here is just kind of like hanging out on YouTube. Like we get it.
Yeah. I had a really bad experience with a you might have seen this guy. I'll say his first name. Um the There was a guy that I was red pilling, and I'm still convinced that I did actually red pill him pretty good. One of
I
the things
remember this.
about
I remember you meant talking about it a few days ago. I think.
I don't know if I was talking about his name's Nick, and he was my friend on Facebook. I knew him in college. He was friends with like one of my college boyfriends, and so I met him like once in person a really long time ago, like fucking 15, 16 years ago, like really long time ago. Um, but like somehow we maintained being internet friends, and he is a straight guy who's feminine, who hangs out with like hippie type fucking people. He lives in Massachusetts, um, and so he has a lot of feminist friends. And he's always known that I was smart, but then he tried to pull the like, oh, are you turning to the dark side? You're getting into men's rights, blah blah blah. And I was like, well, maybe I should tell you about this stuff. And he prides himself on being very reasonable. He thinks he's so fucking reasonable. And so he actually engaged me. Um, but it did become very clear that he had a superiority complex in the way that, like, he just assumes that all of his confirmation bias type shit is is true, and that his his natural gynocentrism comes from a reason and not from, sorry, not his natural gynocentrism. He assumes that all of the gynocentrism he has now is just the way things are, and that he's not overwhelmingly a feminist, and that he doesn't have a very amplified version of gynocentrism. And so I was starting to explain to him, no, actually, you do. Even if you don't think that you are that much of a feminist, which he does define as a feminist, but like he definitely wasn't like a true believer or anything. Like, but I had to like deprogram him for weeks and then months. Like I was, telling him things that aren't true. And after a while, it was becoming apparent that he kept coming to me. He kept posting on my posts, thinking that maybe he had a leg to stand on and argue against me. But then it became clear that every time he would lose the argument, and then it became apparent that he was getting frustrated because he kept losing. Because he considers himself so fucking reasonable. He's so reasonable, and so he was going to keep doing and he doing it, and he wasn't going to come right out and insult me, but he was starting to be kind of a child and like be slightly petty as time went on because he kept losing. Because people who think they're reasonable generally just think that they're really smart and that they're better than you and that they'll beat you in an argument and they won't have to like throw a tantrum at the end because they were wrong. That's usually what it is when somebody thinks they're so fucking reasonable, is what I've learned. So after a while, it got to the point where I felt like I was red pilling him and I was getting through. And I found, I don't remember what it was anymore. It was maybe some article from a recovering feminist, explaining how feminism is, or intersectionality is bullshit and doesn't help the people it claims to speak for, or some shit like that. And, it only helps upper middle class white women who are in college or career activist feminists and, some shit like that. And I ended up posting on his timeline because I was like, this time I'm going to initiate the interaction with him. I'm going to, because he always would post on my posts. So I decided to post on his timeline, hey, take a look at this article. Well, he had one feminist friend. This bitch, I'm going to call her Carla. She was a fucking lunatic. The kind of lunatic where I wonder if she just is actually mentally insane or if she actually has a gig trolling the internet for feminism. Because the levels of her insanity was, like as soon as she saw that I was doing MRA type stuff, she was like, "Who is this guy? He's a horrible misogynist. He clearly hates women. I bet he thinks that Bill Cosby was innocent. I bet he thinks Bill Cosby was innocent. I bet that he thinks that Brock Turner was innocent. I bet that like madness immediately." And like post after post after post, and like, and then she was just calling me a troll and saying that I'm not real and being like, why don't you have real pictures of yourself? Which she didn't either. And it was and this is where it got really, really, really frustrating. I Because of the fact that I had initiated the interaction this time, and I felt like I was winning with this particular friend of mine, the dude that I was trying to get through to, I was trying to be super, super reasonable. And that's what, he kept trying to be reasonable the whole time. So him and I were trying to have these reasonable discussions about feminism versus men's rights issues. But, I kept winning. I kept winning. And then when his crazy fucking feminist friend came at me and was like, just saying, everything that she could fucking think of, like being like, I bet your mother didn't love you when you were a kid. Is that it? Do you just hate your fucking mother? Just things like fucking like that. Like she was really actually saying that. Um, he, I started eventually being at least slightly rude with her because I kind of had to be. There was no way to be polite with her. Um, and then he started blaming me for the conflict. And it was so blatant. Like like there's no way that anybody ever could look at this situation and think that I was the one instigating the conflict. It was so clear that there was somebody who was just batshit crazy attacking somebody who was barely willing to defend himself, which was me. Like I was barely even willing to defend myself. And he started blaming me, and he started telling me, "Hey, Prince, you should stop speaking to her like that." And I was like, "No, I refuse to, because you can tell her to stop speaking to me like that." And he was like, "Well, you should know better, because if you want to have a productive discussion, blah, blah." And I was like, "No, fuck you, dude. Look at the shit she's saying to me." And it got to the point where she literally did call me a racist. Okay, she inferred. She said something to the effect of, "Yeah, I bet the only reason that you're picking on feminists is because they're just women. If it was black people or if it was gay people, you would probably stop. But you're doing it because it's just women." And it was like, "Oh my God, you just called me a racist and like you just inferred that I'm probably a racist and a homophobe that's too scared to take out okay, I'm gay, you dumb fucking cunt." You know? And I was like, "See, dude," and I told my friend, I'm like, "Look, this is how insane she is. She just called your gay friend," because this guy's not even gay. I was like, she just called your gay friend a homophobe because of how insane she is. And you're reprimanding me for sticking up for myself. And then, of course, she was trying to deny that she called me a homophobe. She's like, "Well, I didn't explicitly say that." And I was like, "Oh, shut the fuck up, you fucking," And so finally, I convinced my friend. I was like, "Stop telling me to stop telling me to not defend myself against this crazy person. Instead, if I'm gonna be nice, you need to tell this crazy fucking piece of shit feminist to be respectful to me." Finally, after like it it took him, I had to ask him like 3 or 4 different times. Seriously, 3 or 4 different times after he told me to stop attacking this crazy bitch. He finally said, "Okay, Carla, stop attacking Prince. Even if he attacks you, don't attack Prince." And then it was at that point, she just stopped entirely. Entirely. She never said even a slightly provocational thing to me again. And it was this night and day difference and he only had to say one sentence. Like all he had to do was call off the guard dog, you know? And it just revealed such a ridiculous dynamic where it was like, was he wanting her to do that the whole time? Like, did he harbor some resentment that he was not able to beat me in an argument? So when he saw a batshit crazy feminist that was willing to call a gay man homophobic, to say that I probably believe that, Bill Cosby was innocent, to say every fucking crazy thing she could think of, instead of seeing the situation for what it was, he just simply sat back and took pleasure in it because he had been wanting to, to lash out at me for months. And I stopped considering him a friend after that. I was like, no, that's just unacceptable. Like, I can't, you know. And he would never admit to how awful that is. Like, if you're friends with two people and one of them relentlessly starts attacking the other one, and you let that one person just get away with it and be like, well, I don't know, and you blame the person that's being attacked, like that's as good as you attacking your friend, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because like what does a friendship mean if you don't, defend someone? And there's a difference, of course, between like sycophantically defending. Like if your friend legitimately does something fucked up, it's kind of like, you can, you know, you can deal with that on your own. But if they're being attacked, like right, they're not the initiator, of course, right? Like I kind of had a like I think that in your situation, what had happened, right, is like he had a side he was on, and I think he just was looking for the opportunity to attack someone who he disagreed with. because like I don't know, I had a really similar experience where I think it was a party and I was having a really heated conversation with someone else, and like we weren't like attacking each other, like we were just having a disagreement, and I was explaining like, like I think that there's no good iteration of feminism. There was no excuse for only focusing on women's issues. It should have been an equal gendered movement from the very beginning, with conversations about both male and female rights and male and female responsibilities the entire time. That's kind of my general stance that I always take. And he was saying, oh, well, if you go into these men's rights groups, like it's all misogyny. I remember looking through them and all I could see was just women hating and blah, blah, blah. And I'd say, well, who? Like, name it. Where did you go? Like, tell me who these people are. Because if this is some, like, are the red pill shit, so many, like, every single major men's rights anything has disavowed it. And they coined the term, or that, coined red pill in terms of men's rights was coined even before then. So, like, it's just completely fucking ludicrous, right? And, like, the reason I get so offended, it's not just a matter of someone being wrong in that case. They're going around spreading this idea that the men's rights movement is all a bunch of misogynists, and I haven't really seen that. Like, I've been following the movement for like 4 or 5 years now, and like I don't fucking see it. I see people like the Honey Badgers. I see Paul Elam, even like Janet Bloomfield. She kind of got her panties up in a twist over like women's suffrage or whatever. But if you actually break down her arguments and see what she has to say, she's a great thinker with a lot of really interesting, super awesome things to say. And then, on the other side of the coin, like I freaking love Diana Davison too. And like, but like I could name you like dozens and dozens of names of people who are doing it right. And because I'm following the MRM, like I find these people, and when new people show up, they tend to drift on the channels. Like Aiden Paladin, like she's new this year. I
Yeah.
know who she is because she showed up on the Honey Badgers, right? So like this person's clearly
I've
not
streamed with
engaged.
her before. She's pretty interesting.
She's amazing. I'm blown away. Like
Yeah.
yeah. Like so and then Naked Ape, that was one that I discovered very late last year, and I was really disappointed that I hadn't subscribed earlier. So I love those moments when I get to kind of play some catch up, because I guess I'm just insatiably watching fucking YouTube videos.
Yeah,
But
I really like Aiden Paladin. I think she's really, really smart. Uh I like that she does the psychological research. I think that that's really helpful. I think her video about I don't know, it was the one that she released maybe a week and a half ago about psychological recoil theory or something like that. God, it was really good. That one in particular was really, really, really fucking good. It was basically describing
oh, sorry.
the way echo chambers on the internet and stuff influence people's ability to learn and be curious. And she went through a long kind of like psychological explanation of how like if people are not confronted with new information enough, but instead confirmation bias, it makes them no longer curious, and they become unable to learn new things and that kind of thing, and a very thorough explanation of how it actually works, and it is the kind of thing that like I've been noticing for a very, very long time.
Was it an evergreen video she did? I feel like
No,
that's
it was after that.
wow. Oh, okay. Because I know she did like she did that a while ago, and then well, anyway.
Yeah.
But
Naked Ape, I find I kind of love some of his videos. Like his videos are wildly entertaining, and he's very, very smart. Like I will fully admit, like he's very smart. I think he's a little bit too sure of himself. And I think that that becomes a little bit of a problem because he's like, oh, I figured out what's true. I'm going to tell everybody else. And it seems like he doesn't really stop to like check his work enough. And I'm not just saying that simply because that's sort of what I think of him from afar. It reminds me of myself when I was younger. And there was a lot of things that, I was 85, 92% right about. And then a few years went, and then, okay, so like when I was like 23, for example, when I was 23, I got semi-internet famous for some complicated shit, and I thought I knew fucking everything. And granted, I was mostly right. I was mostly right. I was like 90% right. I really was. But there was some older people who were like, yeah, dude, you're pretty fucking smart, but you're also fucking 23. And I was like, so fucking what? Fuck you. You're fucking 35. Fuck you. And they're like, yeah, but you're fucking 23. Like, you don't, I, no, I can see that you're smart. No one's arguing that you're smart, but like, you're not right about everything. And I don't know if anyone is. And you need to cool your jets and you need to slow down because you're going to regret the fact that you really thought that you knew everything. And I did not listen to these people at all. And then sure enough, there was that 10% that, I was wrong about. And it's like, okay, that's why they were saying that. And that's the kind of thing. I don't know how old Naked Ape is, but I'm guessing, he's probably in his mid-20s or so. Probably maybe somewhere 20, 26 through 27, 28 is what I would sort of guess.
Yeah, he's not much younger than me. Just because I feel like, I don't know, like he's like got such a better command of issues and a presentation and everything that
But
like.
it's but his deal also has to do very strongly with his ego. If you have that type of ego, which I did, like when I was younger, I had a fucking impeccable ego, and I was every bit as smart as I am now, if not smarter. I was probably actually sharper, and my vernacular of just the way that I would speak, like I sounded really really fucking smart, and like it seemed like I was so sure about what I was talking about, and I was very convincing. And like years later, I would find old posts of mine on message boards because I could still find my text. And I'd look at it and I was like, damn, I thought that I'd be embarrassed by my writing from 4 years ago, but shit, I was right. Jesus. And then I'm like, well, but God, I was mostly just really convincing, like more than anything, I was just really, really, really fucking convincing. And that's kind of what I see with Naked Ape. It's like he's really, really smart and he's really convincing, but at the same time, it's like he does just assume that because he convinced himself, it's true. And I think that gets dangerous. And you can tell that he thinks that way by the way that he talks to other people. If you've ever seen him in a stream, which is very rare, he talks to people like he knows everything.
I listened to one from I think January that Spino was on also, but that's all I've heard of it, and I've heard it like so long after the fact too. So I guess I didn't follow that super closely. I don't know. I guess off the top of my head, I can't think of anything I'd challenge him on, but at the same time, I wouldn't say that I have like an exhaustive command of all of his views. But
yeah, I don't. I would say something
in
similar.
particular,
It's
like
no, it's just it's sort of like what I said. It's like I watch his videos and I'm like, okay, 90% of this is definitely true, and then that other 10% might not be true. But I'm not gonna like say he's wrong because I don't want to like get into it. But at the same time, I
well,
don't.
because he'll put up a poll,
I don't. Okay,
right?
so like, I don't want to get into it. I don't want to look at that 90. I don't want to look at that 10% that might not be true, and I don't think that he's looked at that 10% that might not be true either. I think that he just figured.
No, because that's all the more reason to do it. Like
Yeah.
then force him to go and look it up and then see what comes of it.
Well, no, I'm not. I'm not that
One way or
interested in his
another.
work. I'm not. No, because I don't think it would work anyway. I don't think that he's the type of person that like. Well, first of all, I make my own fucking videos. I'm not gonna sit there and like check his little work for him. Okay. But like, uh, if I did, if I was like, hey, this is something that you might not be right about, I don't think that he would like take it as an effort of good faith and be like, oh, maybe I should, blah blah blah, amend my views, blah blah blah. Like I would have to like fucking fight him tooth and nail to stretch. He's just that type of guy. You can tell by the way he interacts with people and the way he makes his videos, and that's, like if you watch my live streams and shit, I am totally open to talking to people about shit. And like the way that I write my videos, I try so hard to be balanced. Like I try so hard to, if I'm putting forth an idea that has a contrary idea to it, I try to very accurately represent what the other idea is to the best of my ability. I'll be like, well, if you say this, feminists will say this, but I don't think that that's true because of this. And that's how I write my videos. But I would not have done, if I was a YouTuber when I was like 23, I wouldn't have done it like that. I would have said, this is the fucking truth. I would have been kind of like Blair White or something, you know? So that's kind of how what I think about Naked Ape. I think he's very smart. His videos are very entertaining, and there's a lot of truth to them. But I do worry that he might be leading people in some arenas down a wrong path.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess some of the best content out there has been, I guess, instances where people kind of, like sheep, they kind of follow someone off the edge of a cliff, and then somebody else comes along and it's like, hey guys, like, what was a good example? I think Harmful Opinions did a few videos that I think were like he went kind of contrary to the overall momentum, and I think that was really commendable. I don't know how far. I feel like it's so adjacent to so much fucking drama though. Like going to what you think was like right or wrong. But oh, one thing I wanted to mention, yeah, as far as like representing other ideas, I actually, I have a little bit of experience coaching debate part time,
Mhm.
and one thing I would try to do is obviously I try as much as possible to not let them know what my bias was, because I felt that I really didn't like a lot of my teachers for that reason, that their agenda was too obvious, And at the end of the year, I asked them like, so where do you guys think I am on the political spectrum? And like they all thought I was an extreme like fucking leftist, and I was like, should I be proud of this? I was like, shit, like the fucking opposite guy. Like, does that mean I'm a bad teacher that they like couldn't read it at all, or does it mean that I was good because I tricked them? But yeah, it's a hard job. It's a hard job. I'll leave it at that.
The debate coaching.
Fuck yeah, it's so hard, man. Well, the other thing too is I'd get kids who like weren't interested in debate. I'd be like, hey guys, like check out all of this stuff. Like, it's like do some social contract theory and all this interesting whatever like this. I don't know. Some of them didn't quite take to it, which
Do you
is
ever
sad.
take those fucking the Myers-Briggs test things?
I have at a few points. I never remember what my results are. But I know they change.
I got the
And
fucking arguer one both times I took it. I mean, granted, those were within the past couple of years, and that's one of the tests where it can change over the course of your life depending on like what
yeah,
phase of your life you're in. Because I know that if I would have taken it like 6 years ago, probably I or like 7 years ago, I would have not been the arguer because all I wanted to do was get wasted and make music. I did not want to fucking engage in arguments with people, and I know that I was like that, you know. But yeah, I got the arguer one, but and none of the other people that I know in my life, people will take it and they'll post their results on Facebook. I got the INTJ. I'm the fucking blah blah blah. I never got one of those fucking empath one. I was always the fucking arguer.
well, yeah, because like people talk about the marketplace of ideas, and I like to think of it as kind of like a battleground of ideas. Like our ideas are little battle bots, and we're all gonna make them kind of kick each other's ass. And like for me, like one of the things I like for the reason I brought up with like for example, Naked Ape, like if you feel like there's a 10% that you don't like, I feel like that's like the absolute best way to learn is to go and like take some really really contentious position like hey you're fucking wrong and this is all bullshit and you're full of it and blah blah and then they're like well fuck you I'm gonna fucking throw some fucking links at you and
Yeah,
like at the end of the day you could always just say oh yeah you make some great points and I was wrong about X Y and Z and here's my point and sorry I wasn't clear about this and then people will just look at that and go oh, that was really mature that you admitted that you were wrong. Like you always have the redemption path available. And I think if people actually realize that, like you can just admit that you're wrong. It's actually not that hard. It's not that painful. I do it all the time. It's awesome. It feels great because people don't expect it. You just admit that you're wrong. And then
yeah,
they take the position that beat you. And then now that's your Excalibur. And now you're that much better at arguing.
yeah.
Like,
But you also have to keep in mind that like when you're talking about sociopolitical issues, you have to deal with the combination. Okay, so like the equation, and like I'm sure there's some sort of like theoretical fucking physicist or some theoretical mathematician who has tried to work with this in terms of like statistical psychology. But this would be an interesting thing to try to do to calculate the Overton window based around the political zeitgeists of people's geographical location. So, what is the Overton window of feminism at this point? Okay, so we can just use ourselves as an example. If you are a conservative that lives in the Pacific Northwest, like I do, which, you know, there's not a whole lot of conservatives in the Pacific Northwest. There are some. Um, how likely, like, what is the Overton window? You know the term, right?
I actually am not, but I just pulled up the Wikipedia, and I think I understand what you're saying. It's basically just like the degree to which people are going to be accepting of new ideas and kind of where the limits are on what
Yeah,
ideas are considered like acceptable versus what constitutes like an idea that's like just radical or
yeah. A good way to say it is that like currently everybody knows what intersectional feminism is. But even just 3 years ago, if you said intersectional feminism, most people would not know what intersectional meant. So the Overton window currently includes intersectional, whereas 3 years ago it would not have intersectional would not have been in the Overton window. So um, if you keep in mind the arguments and then where you are, right? So like I'm in Seattle, right? And you're in Minneapolis. These are different places with, you're like we could say, oh, well, they're both very, left-leaning cities, but at the same time, no, you're in the fucking Midwest and I'm in the Northwest. Very different. Very different. Um and then you have to keep in mind, well, what's my social sphere like? Is most of my family conservative? Are most of the people that I know conservative? In my personal social sphere, nobody I know in Seattle is conservative. None of my friends, period. None of my family, period. I just don't know any. The only people I know who are conservative are people I know from the internet, period. So my Overton window, okay, so there's two factors. There's what's my personal zeitgeist, and then what is the Overton window based around me, and then where does that overlap with your Overton window as somebody from the Midwest who's in a mostly um do you see what I'm saying? Like you would have to take into account four different um generalized spheres, which would be the zeitgeist that I live in, the zeitgeist that you live in, and then each of the general zeitgeist's Overton windows, and how those two things overlap, and like what things can we talk about that we can immediately relate to based on those around us, that and and what things can't we, and obviously we can have a conversation, but it becomes really difficult when you look at somebody like Naked Ape as compared to me. It's like, okay, so he's a gay guy and he knows enough about feminism and shit to be critical of it, but at the same time, when I look at Naked Ape's videos, he's supposed to be a gay guy, but like he doesn't seem to have that much experience with the gay community in the way that I do. So his experiential zeitgeist is quite different, and that shapes his Overton window. You see what I'm saying?
yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, I guess like for me, I ideally like to think that my Overton window, like it's I don't know. I've never had a popular opinion. Like I really haven't. Like none of the things I like were popular. None of my opinions are ever popular. And I don't know if maybe there's just a part of me that just wants to be contrarian. So I'm just drawn to just shit that either nobody cares about or nobody likes.
Or it's just you're bored of it by the time it becomes popular.
No, seriously. Like when I was in middle school, I was like obsessed with Japanese pop music.
That's what we call the legit stir. The legit stir feels that way.
No, it's really, yeah, and I was like, and I don't know, I just like loved all that shit, and then I started to seek out music through the internet, and I would try to find things that I would never ever be able to hear just walking around because I felt like well, I'm gonna find American music on the radio, or it's gonna be on TV, or like I'll get an inkling of it just kind of existing. But this is the kind of shit that I have to seek out. If I do not, seek out an Ayumi Hamasaki album, I'm going to die without hearing it. That's a fact. Whereas like I'm going to hear Madonna whether I want to or not. So to have like a more broader command of like these kinds of things, I was like, okay, I have to go and investigate all this shit. And then it just like trickled all the way through like my entire personality. Like my favorite genre of music is Eurobeat and like ANCAP. Like nobody is a fucking ANCAP. I mean, on the internet, some people are, but like in my day to day life, no, not really. And like I'm really used to just always having a position that I guess is extreme or radical. Um, and I'm used to, the opinion just getting rejected on the grounds that it's not like nuanced or moderate enough. And like the way that I've always kind of addressed this topic, not under the name Overton window, but the way I see it is like if someone comes along and takes like a ludicrously radical stance, they create ground. They stretch the ground out. They stretch the window by being at the extreme. And it does matter like how the extremist gets treated, right? Because if the extremist just gets discredited immediately and then swept under the rug, like that's not helpful. But if people come along and say, they made a couple of great points, but God, their tone was so condescending, or or oh, they really took it just too far, right? Like they took it to dial 11 and it should be at dial 8. Like sometimes that achieves more than a person who right out the gate tries to be reasonable right off the bat.
Yeah.
You
Because
know?
then you run the risk of equivocation, and when you start, trying to be like, well, MRAs make a lot of valuable points, which is not to say that patriarchy does not hurt people too. But if we look at the MRA argument, blah blah blah, that's not going to change a
Exactly. If
feminist.
right out the gate I'm like feminism is cancer, then like they don't like it's harder for them to backpedal into well
Yeah,
no the patriarch and it hurts men too because I right out the gate I said no like your ideology is hurting men specifically and then it forces them to address that and to go down that line of argument and they should have to they absolutely should have to answer for those
yeah. And that's what people
like,
don't. That's what people don't understand about like successful debate is that like it's like, look, it's the goal here is not necessarily to get the person to walk out of the room saying, I submit to you, you're right about everything, I'm your bitch. The goal is to win and to expand the argument. And so it's like if you take 2 steps forward and they still take 1 step back, goal accomplished.
yeah absolutely and like I don't know I just think people are like they're fucking pussies about debate. Like, I just feel like if you make the line between calling someone's ideas stupid versus calling them stupid, if you're really careful about that, then what the fuck's the problem? Like, we should be allowed to just savage each other's ideas. Like, and like even when it does cross over into ad hom, so the fuck what? Like if you don't value their opinion anyway, then why do you value their opinion as to whether or not you're a fucking idiot? And if you do value their opinion and they say you're an idiot, well, then you should be thanking them for exposing that to you. Like from a logical perspective, it just, I don't know, like,
Yeah. Or sometimes you just have to disengage with that individual person, which is fine too.
like
But
I really do seek out getting my ass kicked in an argument because it does make you stronger. And like, I got to a point where I would just kind of state positions more and more radically, not like in a disingenuous way, but because like I wouldn't be sure. I'd be like, maybe this is too extreme. I'm not 100% sure. I'm going to throw it out there and word it this way with these weaknesses in the argument because that way it's going to draw people in because they're going to say, oh no, look, that can't be true. I'm going to go and exploit this argument. And then it opens up that dialogue and that back and forth. And then it creates an outlet for me to explore that idea and to see the degree to which it's true and to see whether or not I need to find a way to, to kind of amend it or to be more careful with my words. And like I really, really cherish that. I really cherish those experiences when I get to walk away and say, I've gained a new command for how I can use words to more clearly convey what I think is the truth.
mhm.
Yeah, and it just makes me sad that more people don't like love doing that. I don't know. I mean, I guess there's a lot of things that I don't love doing that they love doing that maybe they wish I loved to do. So I try to be charitable.
Yeah,
But
like Zumbia dancing or something.
yeah, I can't twerk and I can't cook. And I'm like really bad at hosting. If I have my friends over, I'm always just like tripping over myself, trying to like make sure they like if they want water, they can get it. Like making sure like nobody like trips over anything on the floor, making sure there's not like a cat shit somewhere or whatever. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's not no,
I
it's not that bad. It's not that bad. But
I I I when I was in college, I one of my first actually okay, my first viral thing that I ever did on the internet was back in Friendster. So like we didn't really have the term viral because the term viral came from social media. Like it had to be social to become viral. And Friendster was the first social media platform. And it was did you ever hear of Friendster?
I remember hearing about it, but I mean, for me, the first port of contact would have been like MySpace.
Yeah.
So this was even before then. This was like the fucking age of like GeoCities and shit.
It was yeah, it came within the within a couple years. I think Napster was still
You're
existing.
wrong. You're wrong. The first social media website, I'm pretty
Oh,
sure.
Makeout Club?
No, it was Neopets.
Oh, I don't even fucking know what the fuck that is. Well, Friendster people actually used, but it was only really people in New York City and LA. And I was living in New York City, and it was basically the thing that all the hipsters used as a Rolodex in the early 2000s for a few years. For really only like 2 years, and then MySpace took over. And Friendster, the only thing that they really had was you got to have like 5 pictures of yourself, only 5, and then you got to have all your friends, and you had your about me, you had your who I want to meet, and you had your favorite music, favorite television, favorite movies, and I think that that was really about it. And uh oh, and you could write testimonials about your friends. You could kind of write comments on there, tell the world what you thought of your friends. And oh, and you could write bulletins to your friends. So my first thing that ever became viral on the internet, this was when I was in writing school in college. I made a Friendster profile. And like, okay, so when they created this internet social networking site, it didn't occur to them that people would make fake profiles. And it and they started, deleting them because everybody realized how fun it was to make up fake profiles from of like people from television shows and shit. And so people were making, like profiles that were called like gay cliche, and like it was like, hi, I'm a gay cliche, I blah 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 blah, and I was like, okay, I can do a better one of these because I was in playwriting school. This is what I did. So I
The
did.
Scott Carded and the fucking internet prank, the path to internet viralhood just like showed itself for you.
Yeah,
Fucking,
exactly.
fucking fake Friendster profiles before anybody caught on to it.
No, dude, I fucking
I
made
love
like
it.
I probably made like 2 or 3 fake Friendster profiles and like 5 or 6 fake MySpace profiles because we didn't have YouTube back then, and I sure as hell didn't know how to make videos. So I fucking my viral Friendster profile was called College Party, and it was like, hey, yeah, I usually officially start at around 9 p.m., but nobody's really there for the first 2 or 3 hours. Only 5 or 6 people are there for the first while. Well, the host tries altogether way too hard to make sure everybody's having fun. Except it's kind of advantageous to get there early because you might get one of the few mixed drinks made from the 2 bottles of actual hard liquor. But then around midnight, 20 people show up at once, half of them have brown bags of 40s and shit, and they yell, "Play some hip hop, play some hip hop," and and then everybody has to play hip hop, and some of the more clueless individuals bump and grind in the living room, while all of the cool kids hide in various bedrooms in the fucking house, and they listen to electronic and indie music for a little bit, and they
Yeah, like this is one of the reasons I can't get along with people at parties is because like if I get too drunk at a party, I'll be like, "Oh my god, you have to play this Israeli tranny pop singer I really like. You got to. It's so good. You'll love it. You'll love it. Everyone will love it. We all have to hear it right now."
yeah. Yeah, no, no, and there'd always be that in in New York art school land. Because okay, so like another thing that people don't understand, and I don't know if it's really still like this, but it certainly was in the early 2000s. The New York college landscape of art school kids was like its whole social universe. Where like if you went to one of the more arty parts of NYU or Columbia, um, and then or the New School University, which has like Parsons School of Design, which is like Project Runway. Um, a lot of my friends were Parsons School of Design, the Project Runway school, and then I went to the writing school that was from the same university. And then we knew a lot of kids that went to NYU, and then there was like the School of Visual Arts. There was Pratt. There was Cooper Union. There's a fucking butt ton of art schools in New York City, and there's an entire like demographic of young people who all kind of know each other through college parties in New York City. It's weird. And it's like something I don't know if it's really still like that because I bet that like now people don't socialize in the same way that we used to. But at the time, in the early 2000s, when the internet was first starting to make cross pollination easier, and then there was like these, you know, swarms of different kids from different schools that were like within a few miles of each other, we'd end up at these parties every weekend and we'd see the same kind of people kind of and be like, "Oh, those are those girls from the School of Visual Arts. Yeah, no, that one's a cunt, but her friend's pretty nice. She dated my old roommate." And like we would know each other for the next couple of years and we would stay loosely connected on the internet. Well, now everybody's on the internet and like everybody gets lost, you know? And so it's different. But at the time, it was like I should really write an entire series about it. It would be like That 70s Show, but it would be called That Aught Show or something. Um, and it would be about New York college artsy kids. It was so yeah, the party was like the college party profile on Friendster. It was like, yeah, you know, it's really awkward. And then the arty subculture kids hide out in various bedrooms and they listen to electronic music and indie rock while they smoke pot and they hide from their mortal enemies in the living room who are the drunk straight people or drunk boring people listening to hip hop and bumping and grinding. And then um after a few hours the party seems divided. The people are hiding, you know, half the people are in bedrooms and then other people are just starting to get bored and drunk in the main room, and but things can only go one way. Finally, somebody makes their way to the fucking stereo and they put in an 80s greatest hits CD and all hell breaks loose. Everybody's drunk enough and they all start singing along to 80s songs, and your best friends hook up with each other. You do cocaine for the first time in your life and it wasn't really all that fucking cool. And
Maybe like a cup of coffee that makes you want to fight a little.
yeah.
Maybe
So,
a friend.
I don't
Hopefully a
remember
friend
the
told
rest
me.
of the college party. I think I have it saved somewhere on a laptop that has a broken screen. But I don't remember all of it. But that fucking profile, it got to like something like 700 friends within like a week or something. Like it became, and back in the day, if something became viral, it was very different than now. Like I tell people that if somebody had 500 friends back in the day, that was the same as 5,000 followers on YouTube. You know, like 500, 5,000 was about equal because people weren't on the internet in the same way that they are now. And it became
So it's
viral.
likes inflation,
What?
likes and friends inflation,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
inflation of likes and now reacts.
Yeah. Um, no, and then after a week, they deleted Friendster deleted my fucking college party profile. And I was pissed. So I made a new one and I was like, "Hey guys, the cops came by, so you gotta like keep it down a little bit, but like invite your friends, only chill people, all right?" Um, and so it got really popular again. It got deleted, and then it was funny because friends of mine, they thought it was the most funny thing in the world, and we literally went to college party, and we had like high five sessions, being like college party, like they can't shut us down.
That
um,
was like a meme we had a college. People go college, like whenever we did anything, I guess retarded. It's like college.
I had so much fun in college, going to fucking college in New York City from 2000 to 2004 really was like the defining moments of my life. And I everyone kind of probably says that about college, but like I mean I literally saw the World Trade Center fall from my dorm window at the beginning of sophomore year. Like
Well,
I
shit, I guess yeah, you man, your sophomore year was off the fucking chain compared to mine. On that, I majored in philosophy and music because I graduated from high school and they told me just just study whatever you love, just study whatever you're passionate about, and then just go out there and it's gonna be like magic. Um, I mean, I haven't done horrible, but like I know that I pick majors that are like designed to make you poor, like the two that are designed to make you poor. So
well,
it's kind of fun. It's fun to play the like America's favorite game, which is like how far can you get with the philosophy undergraduate degree and nothing else? It's like, let's see what happens. Fuck
yeah,
it.
I mean, hey, I majored technically in playwriting. Okay, well, I went to a liberal arts college, so I did liberal arts theater major concentrating in playwriting. Playwriting being, if you were to just be a strict playwright and live the playwright's life, that is the least lucrative fucking thing that you do. Do you know what playwrights, and I don't mean script writers, I mean playwrights, what they do? And this is all they taught me in terms of okay, so I didn't go to fucking college to become a playwright, to write things that would be performed on a stage. I went to college because I wanted to get good at writing scripts and writing dialogue because I wanted to be a filmmaker and maybe write for television. And I realized that I was smart enough, at least, to realize that if you go to film school, they don't teach you about script writing, and script writing is a really really hard thing to get good at. It's very very hard. You have to practice a lot. And I was doing it in high school a little bit, you know, and I realized I was like, wait, this is really what?
That never occurred to me. Like people say, like writing is a skill, writing is something hard, but like specifically the idea that script writing is difficult, like conversations and everything. Like I don't know. I'm not denying it. I'm just saying it never occurred to me as like script writing itself as an art. But like I write
Oh,
scripts
it's
for
really
my
it's
job
wait, what?
because I work for an answering service, so we just professionally answer the phone for like thousands of different companies. And like I'll get a new client, and then I'll ask them, so like, what do you want us to say when we answer the phone? What questions do you want to do? How do you want your message delivered? And then I'll program a script for them based on that. And so like some of it is like, oh, so I can kind of appreciate a little bit of it, right? For example, if you ask someone, what's your name versus may I have your name, please? It's two very, very different flavors to the exact same kind of
Yeah.
dialogue. but I'm sure that there's a lot when you're talking about
That's only one small
play,
aspect
it's a
of
lot
it.
different. Sorry,
Sorry.
what?
That's only one small aspect of it. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
once you okay, so like when you're a kid and you're watching movies and you think, "Oh, I want to make a movie." You have all these ideas and you're like, "Oh, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this." And if you're smart, you realize that it all starts with the dialogue and the story, you know? Um, but a lot of kids don't realize that. A lot of kids just jump the gun, go to fucking film school, learn the technical trade, and then end up fucking editing for the rest of their life and getting paid to do that, and they're not that happy. That's if they're lucky, if they even get a job editing, like if they're even working in the industry that they studied, which doesn't even happen that much. There's a ton of people who go to film school and who end up waiting tables or, you know, working some stupid office job that they hate for an insurance company. That happens all the time too. But if you're smart, you realize that everything starts with the dialogue and the story, and that you should learn how to take a playwriting class because that's where you're really going to learn that shit. And that stuff is really hard by itself. And if you take your first playwriting class, or you just decide to kind of try to write a play by yourself or whatever, or even just a short scene, and you try to make two people talk back and forth, even just doing that once, just two people talking to each other and only talking to each other, like you don't get to like write the text of a novel, like you don't get to write the fiction, like, well, I was thinking this and I was thinking that and she was looking at me like this, blah blah. No, if it's just them talking to each other, it's hard. It's like you realize, it's like, wait, how do I convey them to get them to do what I want, and how does the audience understand what I was trying to convey? And it's actually terrifying. Like when you first do it, it's terrifying. Like it
Yeah,
makes
it
you.
sounds kind of like walking on stilts in terms of like dialogue writing. You know what I mean? That you lose a lot of that like narrative beat that you can get in like an article or in a book. That if it's strictly a script, like yeah, it has to be all in like the particular things that they're verbalizing or in like the like actions they're taking. And if it's like a play on a stage, like the actions have to be big, right? It can't be subtle. It has to be something that can be seen. So I guess I'm starting to understand a little bit more of like some of the complications in that. But like,
Yeah, yeah, freshman year I had a class called how to read a play, and it was just designed to give intro theater students the skills to know how to read a play instead of seeing it, because most people see plays. And and she told us in the class, she's like, I don't expect you to start reading plays a bunch, but if you're going to be working in theater, you need to know how to read a play and imagine it, because that's how you work in theater. But if you want to know if a play is good, you should see the production, but you should also have the skill of being able to at least read the play and imagine it. And within, I think, the first week or two, she demanded that we write our own script. And I think the purpose of it, looking back on it, this was in the year 2000, so this is like 17 years ago. I don't remember it that well, but I think this was like in the first week. And by the way, this teacher was a cunt. She was not a nice woman. She was mean, and she was judgmental, and she hated freshmen. She
oh,
specific.
that fucking sucks. That sucks so hard for like a creative kind of a class, you know, because you have to be a little bit vulnerable to create anything, especially fiction. So
Well,
that definitely doesn't sound like the kind of personality you want using that kind of a class.
I don't really care. Looking back on it, I appreciate the fact that she was a cunt. I like, honestly. Um and but so I think that the point of her little exercise was to get us to write a short scene, like less than 5 minutes, and then we would all have to read them out loud with a partner or whatever, or give them to two people in the class so that they would have to read them out loud, and then we would see how different it sounded from what we thought was going to happen. It's like, this is how these people interpreted your play. Can you see how different it was than what you thought it was going to be? That was the point of the exercise. And I remember my one when it was I got two other people to read my little script, and I sat there and I felt so awkward. Like I sat there like kind of like covering my face and like giggling the whole time. And then when it was over, she was like, "Well, Prince certainly thought he was funny." And I was like, "No, I don't necessarily think that I no, I it was mostly just that I was uncomfortable." Like, um and
Oh wait, I just want to add. That reminds me. When I was a freshman in college, they showed us. We call it the rape play. They showed us a play about rape, right? When we first get there as part of orientation. And one thing that they noticed is like people, they'd kind of giggle and laugh during certain parts of it, and it was like it was really weird. It was just like part of it was like the shock of the way they were talking about things, and that was something they addressed afterwards. And they said like some people I think laugh because they don't know how else to react. And like this is something if you watch Molyneux's like listener or call-in shows, especially I remember this being like a really constant theme in like 2013, 2014, and those videos he would do. People all the time they would like talk about childhood trauma or they talk about something fucked up, but then they kind of like add a little bit of a chortle on the end of it. And it was the first time I heard somebody like call it out and say, "Why did you laugh right there?" And then they'd be like, "Oh, I guess I didn't really think about it." And like I don't know, for me, like those kind of instances really stick out as like it's shitty when people just like take laughter as always at face value when we always know that like we laugh for all kinds of reasons. And nervousness is a great reason to laugh sometimes. Maybe not a great reason, but like a very understandable one.
yeah, yeah. Well, so hearing your play read out loud in front of you, in front of an audience for the first time, like I had already tried to write plays by myself in high school, and then I realized how hard it was. And then when I like the second I got into college, I was doing it in front of people, and then I realized how hard it really is. Like just writing a 5 minute scene back and forth, two people talking and having people actually read it out loud. It was like like it's a cliff dive. It was terrifying, but it made me awkward. It made me laugh, and then you have to learn to make the two people sound different than each other, which is actually harder than it sounds. Like when you start writing, everybody sounds just like you talk. Kind of, it's like these are two friends, except for they sound exactly like you do. And then you're like, okay, I need to get better at giving them their own distinctive personalities. And then you have to get better at having a group interaction between more than two people, which is yet another thing. How does the one person talk to the other person as compared to, like if somebody is talking to their girlfriend and their mom at the same time, how does the guy talk to his girlfriend as compared to how he talks to his mom? And it's harder than it sounds, again. And then once you get the group dynamic thing, and if you go to a good playwriting school, they teach you this. They teach you like a dinner table scene, and they teach like all these different things, and you work your way up on it, right? And then you have to learn the art of doing a half-hour long play that has three different scenes and making it like sort of make sense so that there's an arc throughout, and that would be a one act play, right?
Right, that makes
And
sense.
then you have to learn by the end of fucking playwriting school to tie all of these things together and make a three-act play that has a sort of a little arc between each different thing, and you write a fucking full-length play. And so it becomes like a massive equation of variables, like different people talking to each other, different scenes, how many people are in the scene, how do those people relate within each act, and then how do those acts relate within the entire plot. And by the time you actually get semi decent at it, it's like you really you're keeping track of so many things, and there's no good way to really explain it to somebody um, without making it sound like this big epic tale, like I'm sure it sounds now. Like I'm saying, like it's just like, oh, that would be hard if you think about it. Like it's like, oh, that would probably be really, really fucking hard, and it's even more hard when you actually do it. And that's
Mhm.
why you watch these indie movies And sometimes you watch an indie movie and like it sounds like a really cool idea, like it has a cool plot from the description, and then the first 10 minutes are really interesting, and then oh my god, you want to kill yourself. It's so fucking boring. And that's because the fucking filmmaker didn't know shit about script writing. They just did not know. They knew how to make it sound in okay, and like most of the films that get made because somebody wrote a first 15 minutes of a script that sounded interesting, and they mostly don't even finish the rest. And that's a well-known industry secret for script writing for screenplays. The way to get your screenplay made is to write a good 15 minutes. And so a lot of these indie movies that are like, weird romances or fucking supposed to be a mystery or something, or a horror movie or some shit like that, it really has is the first 15 minutes. And you can tell they're on Netflix. You try to watch them and you're like, ugh, and you turn it off. And yeah. So there's a pragmatic reason for all of that, and that's the deal with being a script writer. But hey, at least I have an outlet. Like at least I get to do YouTube and get paid, and people apparently like it. So, and by the way, you guys, the super chat's still open.
Oh, you know what though? One thought I just wanted to throw out there, since this was technically a stream about, how feminism harms gay men.
Yeah.
I feel like we're not doing a service if we don't throw this out there, because it's probably one of the single most common things that they do. And when I say it, everyone's going to be like, oh, that thing. And what it is when you point out basically any issue, like any issue that gay men experience, right? What they always do is they say, oh, well, the reason that that's an issue is because gay men are seen as feminine men.
Oh yeah, no.
Feminine is
All homophobia is rooted
right?
in misogyny.
Completely retarded, right? This whole idea, like as
No,
if,
we talk about this on my channel. Okay, I
right?
don't.
Yeah.
You must
But
not
as
watch
if
that
little
many.
girls know the stigma of being a gay boy. Like square that fucking circle.
Wait, say it again.
Like as if little girls deal with the stigma of being a gay boy.
Yeah. No, it's the most. No,
Not a thing.
it's the most illogical thing that is like swallowed by gay men. Like, okay, that sounded weird, but no, it's so fucking frustrating because so many gay guys believe it. So many gay guys, like a gay guy says, "Hey, well, men suffer issues too. I suffer a lot of issues of homophobia." And then a feminist says, "But that's because all homophobia is rooted in misogyny." And the gay guy scratches his head and he's like, "Oh my god, you're right." And it's like that's what it's like. It's so fucking frustrating. And okay, it's wrong on so many levels. And I can see how it tricks how the feminists are able to manipulate them though. Because they usually do it to super femme gay guys. And they tell the gay guy, well, yeah, because your more masculine gay male friends, do they get picked on as much as you do? And the gay guy's like, no, they don't.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's because all homophobia is rooted in misogyny. And those guys are misogynists. Did you know that gay guys can be really misogynists? And they're like, well, not really. I didn't think about that. Well, they are. They are. Those gay guys, those straight acting gay guys, those fucking straight acting mask for mask bros, they're misogynists. That's why they won't date you.
And that's how
That's
they act so straight. That's how they act so straight. That's the secret.
yeah. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, so it's just the fact that they hate women. And so when my friend Scott didn't want to go on a date with me, it's just because he hates women and he's a misogynist, and the straight guys who pick on me just hate women because I'm kind of more girly. That's it. And they're like, yeah, that's it. That's it. That's exactly it. And it's like, okay, I should I should run up to that conversation and be like, wait. Sorry. Um, let's imagine that we're all daycare workers, all three of us. You little feminine gay guy, this girl right here, and then me. we're all daycare workers. And then all of a sudden, a parent comes storming in saying that her little kid said that somebody touched his wiener. And he doesn't remember who it was. The little kid doesn't remember who touched his wiener, but there's me who, despite the way I sound, I look like a relatively masculine dude to look at. There's a girl, and then there's a very feminine gay guy. Who is this mom going to point her finger at first?
Mm.
Is it going to be the girl? No, no, it's not. And it probably wouldn't. It might not be me, but it would probably be the feminine gay guy. But it's not because of misogyny. It's because he's a dude, and that's where I get pissed. The pedophilia thing, especially, is the easiest example of like, no, it's not misogyny. It's just you're the most visible as a gay man because you're feminine. And that's why people pick on you, because they know you're a faggot. They know you're gay by looking at you. If you were straight looking, they would maybe leave you alone. But it's not like they secretly want to pick on all women, and that's why they're taking it out on you. That just doesn't make sense. That's stupid.
Yeah, well, and then think about this too, like with the whole standpoint theory thing, they'll say, well, two people go into McDonald's to get a burger, they have two radically different experiences if one is a man versus a woman. But then if you're talking about like presenting as feminine, the argument is apparently that your biological sex doesn't have a bearing on that. It makes no fucking sense. Like to wear femininity, if you are someone who's identified as biologically male, when people perceive you, like that's the only time that the feminine is devalued in terms of like how you present yourself. Like, yeah, it's just so it's crazy to me that they can't apply their own theory in a way where like it obviously applies and it obviously should.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really frustrating, and it just shows how lacking in any sort of empathy these women are who will say that. Because it's like they're not saying it because they think it's true. They're not saying it because they thought about what it's like to be a feminine gay guy or a gay guy at all, and they were like, "Oh, I know where the homophobia is coming from. It's from." They're saying it so they don't have to think about what it's like to be a gay guy.
Mm-hmm. It's emotionally convenient.
Yeah, exactly. And then like
Wait, I
they.
have to pee really bad. I'll be back in like 2 minutes.
Oh my god, I have to pee too. Um, so you guys it might be a good time to super chat because I can read it out loud and comment on it. Just saying. Because I'm gonna have to mute myself while I piss because I do have my laptop. I walk around with my laptop. Oh, am I? Oh, I'm not muted yet. Okay, good. I almost pissed. So he seems to still be at the bathroom. I'm back, and I need to go hide myself in my room because I'm not alone in my house right now. And so Oh, he seems to be back now. Um, I was just going to mention that the other people that feminists are really fucking cruel to is black men. Like we were talking about this before, but it's sort of the same type of thing. Um, I guess it's different because they don't get to say it's just misogyny, but they'll say it's racism, and then we handle that with intersectionality. But like, oh my god, feminists are cruel to black men. Like I've made a video about this, but like there's black guys who are like proclaiming to their Facebook friend list that they have male privilege and shit like that. And I'm like, no, you don't. You're the last person who has quote unquote male privilege. Like, I mean, there was an argument to be made that white and Asian men have male privilege, maybe. But like as a black dude, you're like everything, like you are the most suffering statistical demographic of people in the United States. And they still won't even admit that. And not just will they not admit that they have male, that they don't have male privilege, but do you know who won't let them even contemplate it? And this really pisses me off is white women. White women come to tell the gay to tell the black man. Like there's all these white feminists who are like, yes, you do have male privilege, Mr. Black Man. You have male privilege just the same as I have white privilege. Thank you for checking your privilege. Now, please go back to serving my food or whatever, like.
Yeah, well, and that's never changed. Like, the origin of feminism is in a bunch of racist fucking suffragettes being bitches. Sorry, but that's kind of. I mean, I get that's reductionist or whatever the fuck, but come on, it's fucking true. And like, the whole thing with accusing black men of rape and then they get lynched. Like, the white women have a bad history of helping black men. Like, just if as a general statement, if you're gonna look at the women's movement to that kind of thing, which I could totally have seen how you have a women's movement that doesn't take that upon itself because it has like a scope. But no, feminists say we're all about everything, right? They're all about anti discrimination based on sex and race and everything. It's all like that's the crazy thing is they claimed that they started to address race issues and they moved on to race issues before addressing men's issues. They addressed
Yeah,
women's issues and then they moved on to race and didn't even do men's issues.
yeah, well, yeah,
So,
because the racial minorities, the fucking black and Latino women were like, you white bitches only care about yourself, and they're like, okay, 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 wait, everyone thinks we only care about ourselves. Well, let's just expand the scope of who ourselves actually include, and that became intersectionality.
yeah, and like to me, it's so obvious that it's just emotionally self-serving. Like you can always draw it to, oh, it's really convenient for you to take on this position because it means like either you get some benefit or you don't have to, or you can demand something from someone else. You get more empathy for your issues than other people. Your issues are presumed to be more important automatically, and
or
if
or, or your issues become supposedly tied up in someone else's issues that is legitimately suffering.
yeah, so then it's like basically they've constructed it so that no matter whose issues people say they want to address, magically the solution is to always do whatever helps white women the most.
Mm-hmm.
They literally linked every single special interest into helping white bitches. Like, I don't
Yeah,
understand.
it's like, well, this we have this whole theory for how to end the world, and we've came up with it. So place all your bets in this theory. Okay, well, who's in charge of this theory? Well, white women, white and Asian women, generally at this point, because now we have people like Sandra Kim, the head of Everyday Feminism, and she's a Asian bitch, And you can just see that. Oh my God, I'm going to screen share her because you can just see the cunt in her face. I'm
Ooh, it's
sorry.
Chairman Pao 2.0.
She who?
Chairman Pao. Remember when Pao took over? Was it Reddit? I think she took over Reddit in like 2015 for like
Oh,
a
I don't
month,
know
and it was
about
an
her.
absolute
I didn't, but
disaster.
she's kind of, she has an even more punchable face. I shouldn't say that because I might get destroyed.
Ew,
She's
did you say
she's
sorry?
yeah.
Okay, sorry. Sorry. I'm into this thing. That's all.
Sandra Kim, Everyday Feminism, images. Look at, oh my God, look at this cunt. Can't you just tell she's the worst? Like, can't you just like imagine trying to hang out with her for like if you met her, she would roll her eyes within 30 seconds, be like, "Hi." Look at her.
Oh my god. Okay. I mean,
Hi, I am a total bitch. I am a
this
massive.
is something that's really funny because I lived in China for a year because I taught ESL, so I got to meet a lot of people who are like legit Asian, like they lived in Asia as, and like I meet people who would be like, "Wow, you're the first white person I've ever met," and that's like so funny to me because as an American, like that's inconceivable, right? But like that's one of the really funny things in like the SJW, right, that comes from like Asian Americans is like if you've actually met people who like live in Asia, they're so the fuck not at all like these people. Like I kind of have a secret dream where I want to be like a trans Asian pop singer, like all my favorite people, like Rachel Dolezal, where I'll like scotch tape my eyes to be Asian and then go to Asia and like they would love it. They think that's the funniest shit ever and they would laugh. But like Asian Americans here would be like, "Oh my god, I can't believe you're," and it's just like, "Oh come on, like you guys are like I don't know. It's just it's
I
so
had
funny.
no, I had a lot of Asian friends growing up, and my family, my aunt is Japanese, like actually from Japan, and my cousins were half Japanese, and I used to speak a little bit of Japanese, and I went to Japan when I was like 17 or so. I knew enough Japanese to get around, like I could ask directions and order food and ask people how they were doing and shit.
Yeah, you just say "kakoi ne" all the time, right? That's
I o genki desu ne?
どこへ行きますか?
Yeah, wakarimasen deshita. I don't understand,
Yes,
sorry.
you do.
Yeah. I could order food badly. Like I would like okay, so like you go to a fucking Japanese restaurant and you have to like try to read all of the hiragana. Okay, so like there's the hiragana, the katakana, which are each alphabets that have 126 or so characters in each of
No,
them.
no, they don't each have that many. I don't think. I think there was like 30 something for each, wasn't it?
No, 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 over 100.
Oh fuck, I'm retarded. I just spaced that, I guess.
Yeah, no, no, there is a lot in each of hiragana and katakana. Or no, it's definitely over 50 in each. And
There's
then
46 hiragana letters
really,
characters.
did I fucking exaggerate that much? Well, okay, but that's still a lot. That's still okay. So there's
Yeah.
46 hiragana,
But
and then
there's a
there's
fuckload of kanji. The kanji is like
yeah, yeah,
thousands
yeah,
of
yeah, yeah, yeah,
kanji. Because
yeah,
every time that Japan invaded China, they'd steal like one or two kanji. So now they have like thousands of them.
yeah, yeah. And so I knew all of hiragana. Okay, I guess I must have like added all of the total of all of the hiragana, katakana, and then fucking all of the kanjis I knew. And so I probably knew about, I could recognize about 150 things on paper. I think is probably what I was working with. And so I would try to like, so sometimes I would go to these restaurants, and like they didn't have English. And so I'm trying really hard. And I'm like 17s and I was by myself. And so I'm like trying really hard to make sure that I do. And I would like order tempura and udon noodles, and I thought that it would be separate, but they came and they like dumped my tempura on my udon and it's like water noodles, and so it was like, no, why did you do that? No, but I had to eat it anyway because I'm like not gonna like send it back because I barely speak Japanese.
Oh my God! One time, what happened to me was I was in China, and like my Chinese isn't great, but conversational in some ways, like basic survival, drunk person's Chinese, right? So like I get this like meal from these people, right? And they go, "Oh, go go go," and I didn't know what he meant. I was like, "Yeah, whatever," and I just walked away, right? And then I was like, "Oh shit, go means dog," right? And then I'm sitting and looking at my dumplings, and I'm like, "No, like no, I didn't ask for dog. There's no
Did
way
you
dog
eat
is the
dog in
default.
China?
It, it's
Oh,
not.
oh,
No,
somebody gave me
it's not.
$5. They say,
Yeah,
good night,
you're fine.
Prince. Thank you. Thank you. Sweet dreams, Casca 52.
But yeah, it turns out what they were saying was, is that enough? Because go means like enough, but it also, if it's go, then it's a dog. So I was like, dog, not dog. I was for a second, I was like, is this fucking dog meat? Shit. But you, because like, for example, you can't ask. Like, if you were to ask, is this dog meat? That's like extremely rude, just like it would be rude in the West. It's not like dog is like one of the meats. It's just like there are a few controversial festivals in China and like the shittiest parts of it, I guess. But like it's not like a mainstream thing. But yeah, I had a little scared just because like it was a homonym of like a different tone, the words enough and the word dog. So
Huh.
so I'll never forget what those two words mean.
Oh, let's see. What time is it anyway? It's 2:36. Okay, well, I still have more beer, so I'm gonna be up for a little moment. But yeah, that Sandra Kim, that woman is, you can just tell she's this upper middle class, you know, has every bit of protection that all of the white women have been trained for the last 400 years in America to feel like, these feminine entitlements, like, if one of them gets distressed by anything, stop the show. They can clutch their pearls and all of the men will be like trying to comfort them. And that's another interesting thing as a gay guy. When I started to realize how fucked up feminism was and how it was training women to be um, emotionally demanding, in this kind of way, where women were being, they were basically holding their entire social surroundings hostage in the way that their feminine drama act, if they ever were upset, then they would, pile on the, oh my God, I can't believe, I, this reminded me of my rape and I'm triggered and blah, 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 blah. Like, once I really realized that they did that and that it even was able to emotionally manipulate me as a gay man, and then I realized that there was a massive amount of, um, that was predicated on a lot of literature and, teaching. They were trained to get better. Like, every girl knows that they can get away with that shit by the time they're fucking 3 years old. They all know that they can get away with that shit. They all know that they can hit their brother, and if he hits her back, she can cry and he'll get in trouble. They all know that, you know? And then feminism, as Karen Strawn says, feminism encourages men to prioritize women in a world that already told them to put ladies first. And so these women take this and run with it. And it becomes this thing, and so now people who are our age, younger, or up through their mid 40s just abuse this to no end, and they're just talking all sorts of nonsense. So now, I'm like, as a gay guy, I've realized, I shouldn't let them get away with it anymore. I should not let them get away with it anymore. And just today and yesterday, I had a Facebook conversation with some woman who was trying to describe her experience working in tech as if it was some like horrible, horrible thing. Okay, so a straight guy that I know asked his Facebook timeline if the women he knows working in tech felt as if 15 years ago during the original tech boom, or 17 years ago, if the sexism was as bad back then, which is already a loaded question, but whatever. And this one woman gave a very particularly intriguing answer, and it was something to the effect of, well, I don't know. I didn't feel like it was the sexism was so bad back then, but over the past couple of years, I've become more aware of microaggressions and stuff, and I've come to realize that it is really bad, and maybe it was really bad back then, and I just wasn't as in tune to it as I am now. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that figures. That makes sense.
It makes perfect sense, right? Because if you think about it, yeah, like if they were as crazy, snowflakey, and as in tune to microaggressions in the past, they'd have fucking lost their minds. They wouldn't be able to handle anything. Like it
Yeah,
makes perfect sense, and it proves the point that of course, things are getting better over time. Of course, you can't honestly say, "Oh yeah, sexism is worse now than it was 10 years ago." Like fuck off, that's retarded. I
yeah.
say that a lot. Is
Yeah, no, and so at first I approached the okay, so what I was trying to do was I was trying to expose this broad as a fucking snowflake and being like, wait. So our male friend is asking a legit question, and your answer to him is like basically, well, I've become hyper obsessed with sexism recently, and maybe it's not super bad, but I could pretend that it used to be bad if I retroactively try to act like it was. It's just so silly if you think about it.
Okay,
And
here's I just want to toss this in here. It's kind of a conservative talking point, so maybe some of your more like left leaning friends will have something kind of interesting to contribute. But like with the whole welfare state, right? People will point to statistically, like here are issues like I guess we'll say the black community because it's the most obvious example. You say, oh look, there's statistical discrepancies in the black community, right? And then I've heard people argue, oh well, unless you're like a 100% total race realist, you have to believe that there's some kind of racism that's accounting for it, right? But like if you look at statistics for things like like the crime rates and like all these like main statistics for overall welfare and its relationship to single motherhood and then welfare's impact on that, basically like the case is so much stronger, right? That the change in the family structure is causing a lot of the issues. And the only way that you can use racism as the explanation is if you legitimately believe that racism is worse now than it was like 50 or 100 years ago. And my question is like, would somebody like if you like revived a black person from the turn of the century, right? The turn of the before, not the most recent one, but penultimate one. If you revive them, would you tell them to their fucking face? Would you tell them to their face, I experienced more racism in 2017 than you did in 1917?
yeah,
Like,
yeah. No. Yeah, it's like Mr. Cletus. Cletus would or like Rufus or whatever. Rufus wakes up. Hey, Massa. No, I'm not sure, Massa. Okay. Look at this guy. Oh, he's looking at me weird. That's a microaggression. It's like what the actual fuck. Now you're typing. Um. So
I'm
I,
doing
I, I
good.
was no, I was hoping that you were gonna talk because I'm trying to smoke now and I can't talk when I'm smoking.
Oh, that's funny. I was never mind. Um, no, I'm trying to engage the chat more because earlier they were talking about Lacey. But do we really want to talk about Lacey? Aren't we sick of her yet? I mean,
It is kind of getting boring. I made a video addressed to her. Did you watch it?
no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was called Dear Lacey Green, My Gay Red Pill Moment.
No, I didn't know. I'm not keeping in character. I'm close to 2000.
Yeah. But yeah, one of the weird things is being a red-pilled gay guy confronting feminists in a venue when um straight guys can witness it and seeing the straight guys bashfully side against you, but you kind of know that deep down they're siding with you, but they can't publicly say so to the feminists because they're a straight guy. They have to please the women.
Wait, I'm sorry. I missed the very first part of that. So what's the first
Oh, it being a gay guy and confronting feminists about their bullshit and being like, no, you're just being melodramatic. You're talking about sexism in tech and you're talking about fucking mansplaining. Has it ever occurred to you that these men were just treating you like they would another man? And maybe you're the one with the problem. Maybe you just weren't cut out to work in tech. And then the woman, throws a hissy fit and freaks out and says, and then the straight guy that you know in common has to pretend to side with her, but he's
Yeah,
attacked.
because he
But
wants to say it too. He knows it better than you do.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, and I wonder, and I guess this is the part of it where maybe we don't have much credibility to speak on, because I wonder, like, if for straight men, how much of it is just that because they have so much more of like the pursuer's role in procuring sex, that things that could turn off women, things that could offend women, all of that has to become a higher priority to them just insofar as they, and I get this is like all the time people will just say of like male feminists, oh, you're just trying to get laid. And I'm sure that's true some of the times, but I personally don't like to throw that accusation out because it's kind of like the inverse of when, they say, oh, you're an anti-feminist just because you can't get laid. And like, I hate that, like, it's always about whether or not women
Well,
will
and
fuck you.
it's also that they don't want to get gossiped about by the fucking
Yeah,
like
that seems like
it's not necessarily so much that like they're trying to fuck the feminists, but they know that the girls they do want to fuck have feminist friends that will gossip about them and say that
oh,
guy's a, you know what I'm
okay,
saying?
that makes more sense. Because at first I thought you were saying like they're afraid that like the feminists are gonna start gossiping, it's gonna ruin it, and like, and that seems more like what a gay man would imagine somebody else would be. I guess more like what a woman would imagine, but either splitting hairs. But no, but like yeah, I guess my point was similar to that, which is the idea that not only that they want to ban feminists, but that they're just kind of, I guess it's a slightly different point, but that they're inclined not to do that when a woman's involved, just because it's going to be ingrained, it's going to be a habit, it's going to be like a way of being, so that
Well,
there's
no,
kind
no, more
of,
like if the straight
but
guy publicly sides with me, even if he totally really does side with me, if he sides with me in front of a bunch of women on Facebook when I'm telling some fucking woman who's complaining about microaggressions in tech 10 or 15 years ago. Like if she's saying, when I worked in tech, I didn't notice the microaggressions, but I now looking back on it, there was lots of them. And I say, oh, shut the fuck up. Maybe you just didn't like working in tech. Okay, maybe that's all it is. If he tells her, yeah, maybe that's true, she is going to get really insecure and tell every woman she knows that this guy belittled her. And she'll tell some hot women too that he wants to date, you know? So he doesn't want to risk that.
of course, part of me says though, if she just like believes lies or hearsay, maybe that's a great way to filter her out, but you know, maybe it's a little idealistic.
Yeah. I mean, that's the libertarian in you.
Oh no, that's not liberty. That's
No, I'm just being silly. No,
no,
but it's that's the individualist in you. A lot of guys really do care about their public image in regards to like what the girls say to each other about him.
well, and this is something I wanted to tease out a little bit too, is that like with individualism, there's kind of, I've always had this idea that the only way I could truly compare my life to someone else is if I experienced it from start to finish, like with all of their variables and everything, right? So like you kind of always have to have this benefit of the doubt. Like you never truly have your certainty. Like I remember being really, really little and thinking, hey, what if somebody else's experience is very similar to mine, but they're in constant pain? But because that's just always how things are, then they think that's normal. Or what if I'm in constant pain and I'm just known to it because I think it's normal? And I was like 7 years old. I remember thinking this, and like that always stuck with me. That this like that's part of why like to generalize was always a problem for me, right? So like what bothers me is that the presumption of the women's movement and the presumption of feminism and the presumption of the entire gender conversation has been that women have this like epistemic privilege that men don't, that women are allowed to say that they can experience what they experience compared to men. And this is something that actually happens. It gets mirrored in a lot of like the black philosophy too. Is they'll say that, and it actually
Oh
makes
yeah, but my lived experiences. I
yeah
have
no.
lived.
But what I will say though is that in regards to race as like racial minority, I can kind of see how it makes more sense because there's a sensation of like the overall um,
Yeah,
body of people, and there's a sensation of acting within society in general, and society within like what society's assumptions and expectations generally are. And then there's your subculture, which, as a result of race, you're surrounded maybe by people, or at least disproportionately, of your race, and that creates like a separate reality. But like with gender, that makes zero fucking sense. It's
yeah,
not the way that the sexes are split up. It's just like what Alison Heenan points out with fucking trying to make like the whole in group out group like different tribes, which is like makes sense on a racial level. It doesn't make sense with gender. And like the
no,
whole Marxist conflicts too with haves and have-not culture, bourgeoisie, like it can kind of be applied to race, and you can make little bits of it kind of make sense. But
yeah.
like you're talking about fucking oh shit, the black hats in here. Sorry, but we're talking about gender. That's not the way fucking humans like. That's not the way we organize at all. Like it's just like a straight ripoff. But sorry, I have to manage my cats because they don't technically get along, and the black cat invaded. So I have to make sure my white cat isn't gonna like chase him down. But I can still hear.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, the false Marxist dichotomy of feminism trying to claim that women are an oppressed class when women are one half of every class distinction that we could, besides gays and lesbians, which are, pretty different, and still don't really apply to Marxism if you really think about it, because it's not like gays and lesbians are some, proletariat that's doing all the work for the rich people. It's like, no, gays and lesbians are just a minority that doesn't necessarily fit in, and they're not, paving all the roads for those straight people that are, using their labor. It just doesn't really work like that. And I mean, ultimately, maybe it's just a reflection of how Marxist philosophies never really make sense. Like maybe it's just never product. Okay, so like I've definitely thought a lot about how, certain Marxist philosophies that I've heard, I've never really read them that much, have I've definitely thought that they've made sense to a certain degree. But it's like sometimes it's like you're more of a libertarian, and as time goes on, it's like maybe you don't ever get to just say that one person's doing all the work and one person's getting the rewards. Maybe it's that never is helpful to say that. Maybe that's it, maybe in a full-blown monarchy that made sense. Maybe if somebody believed that the king, the divine right of kings and shit, in that circumstances it made sense. But maybe it's never made sense since then. Maybe it just hasn't.
Sorry, I missed part of that because I can explain later. It's actually kind of interesting and weird, but no, like are you kind of saying that like it makes sense for society to kind of go through stages that like the stage that humans were at, it wouldn't have made sense to try to do that to democracy. That like we kind of had to go through different stages, including like monarchy, up through kind of what we have. I'm kind of understanding because I've heard that argument. Like it makes sense in some degree, like this idea that you'd have a kind of more primitive forms of government that you kind of like replace with more sophisticated ones as you gain a better grasp of concepts like like justice or whatever.
Well, okay. So like it sort of seems to me like Marxist philosophy, this sort of idea that there's the proletariat and the bourgeois, there's the people who are serving the people, and there's the people who are benefiting from the other people who are serving them. And it's this binary thing where somebody's privileged, somebody's oppressed, and it's fucked up, and we should try to come up with a way where everybody benefits instead of this dichotomy. That only really made sense in the context of full-blown monarchies, where it was demanded that the kings and the queens be served by everybody else, basically.
Okay, that was the bit. Yeah, because I took that totally different direction. But yeah, well, because the difference under a monarchy is that there's no like economic liberty, and like I don't personally
And
think that
no
there's
and no liberty of law. That was the other thing. That was what was gained during the Enlightenment, was that like the king and the queen didn't get to just decide whatever the fuck they wanted anymore. That the law was the thing that reigned above the king and the queen. They didn't get to just, like, for a very long time, people, the king and the queen, if they wanted to kill someone and they wanted to execute someone, they could if they felt like it.
right, right. I mean, I kind of just see social contract theory as like a less bad version of like a divine right 2.0. Like it's kind of just as arbitrary, but like it's more complicated and like it's more cumbersome, and therefore like there's less of that like one person can just like immediately do shit. Like people have to kind of conspire a little bit to make it do their
What do
bidding.
you mean by social contract theory?
Just the idea that like governments are established via a constitution, and the constitution constitutes a contract between the people and the government, and that as a citizen you have like certain obligations, and then the government therefore has certain things to you, and that's kind of like the two sides of the contract, and that it's all voluntary. Like that's something that for like ANCAPs, like we reject this idea that like the constitution is voluntary. Like if it's a social contract, it's not a contract. You would have just called it a contract if it were a legitimate contract. The fact that they have to call it social, especially in regards to the fact that what makes it a social contract is a redefining of the nature of consent, which is what defines a contract. So, in other words, when you apply this term social to the contract, and the thing that makes it a social contract completely radically changes the most fundamental, essential aspect of what a contract is. So, like, yeah, social contract to me is just like magical thinking. It's just like magical. Like it sounds nice and it kind of makes people feel okay, but I think that if you really dissect it, it doesn't make any goddamn sense.
Huh.
Like at all. Like, but it's okay. It's okay. Like that doesn't mean chaos or whatever. Like I really think that the example I always love to point out is if you have two little kids fighting, like and you break it up, the first thing they say is, "Oh well, they started it," and like there's this awful cliche where then the adult says, "It doesn't matter who started it. I'm gonna end it." And like that to me is like the voice of the government, right? Is just saying, "Oh, fuck justice, fuck what really happened, fuck facts, fuck logic. I have the power and I'm gonna end it." And to me, like that's the common strain. That's divine right. That's social contract theory. That's like
Yeah.
but the non-aggression principle, it's totally like if you look at any time someone tries to justify their violence, they always say he started it. They always say, "Oh, they invaded first. Oh, they took my land." Like it's a common strain in like just about everything. There's so few instances where someone's just boldly like, "I'm fucking taking this." Like maybe Russia, but I feel like even with Russia, don't they like make up some bullshit pretense where it's like, "Oh no, we own it," kind of technically, sorta. Like they still like
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like with Russia, it's always like there's so many different little provinces that are always joining up or leaving Russia, that like maybe some people join up with Russia and they're like, "Hey, so now that we're a part of Russia, there was this other little province that pissed us off. Can you help us? You know. But the other thing about Russia is that's weird is that Russia is the most um war torn and self turmoiled nation state probably. I mean, besides probably like Africa, but like okay, so like Russia is a gigantic landmass, and it's not actually all that desolate. I think people in the West like to think that Russia is just a bunch of like cold fields that
Yeah,
don't.
just a tundra with a little like spattering of churches and little old ladies. And,
Yeah, and
and
like
then, and
weird.
then there's just like the Kremlin, which is just like a massive like industrial like Death Star fucking thing in the middle.
Yeah, and then there's
That's what all
somewhere
Americans think, and they
there's
have
somewhere
fun.
off to the side where they're playing live action Tetris or something. Um,
Yes.
but like in actuality, I think throughout history, Russia has had like every century there's been a major civil war, and like half the population dies, and this happens over and over because it's such a gigantic landmass. And if you'd have to actually like study Russian history to know that much about it, and we don't know that much about it in the Western European diaspora. Like it's like we don't really know that much about Russian history, but it's pretty intense, and so it's hard to like actually calculate that much about it. I mean, and also because there's so many dead people that came from it. Like it wasn't just the communists, like the Soviet Union. There was shit that happened before that, like multiple times. That was like maybe semi similar. Hey, Saomi.
But yeah, I mean, in terms of what was it? Basically, the whole idea of like under a monarchy, like Marxism making sense. I really do think it comes down to economic liberty. Like when you have the economic liberty, that's when a lot of the bourgeoisie proletariat shit doesn't make any sense because the entire contention is that structural violence is as important as like actual violence from an agent who is responsible for those actions. And the problem with structural violence is there's no agent. So what ends up happening is there's no one who you're allowed to retaliate against, and therefore what do you retaliate against? You can retaliate against all of reality, thus like government. It can just kind of across the board kind of fuck everyone over, and it's for the good of society in an abstract way. Like when you have capitalism, the employer-employee relationship is voluntary. There might be factors which people might consider structural violence, but it's like saying like if you're on a desert island, like the fact that you need to drink water to not die, like nobody did that to you. Like you can't, you know what I mean? That cannot be used as a justification for initiating violence against someone else. It can't because there's no agent. Yeah, it sucks. Yeah, people can have sympathy. Yeah, it's a problem and it should have a solution. But I think that it's really, really easy and really clear to draw these lines. Like I don't think it's that hard to see that that's something where no, you have to use voluntary means to procure it. And you know, as long as you have a voluntary relationship between employers and employees, the whole proletariat bourgeoisie shit, that entire narrative just completely crumbles because of the voluntary relationship, because of the voluntary aspect.
Yeah, yeah. When it's capitalism, it's like no. Well, man, these people don't have to be poorer than us and cleaning our windows. They just are. What can I do about it? Um, Similarly, with when it comes back to gender issues, I, I have a friend, I'll say in quotes, I don't know if I'm going to be friends with him anymore, and he,
You got a
uh,
couple of those.
what?
But you got a couple of those.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of those going on in my life right now. And um the thing is about this guy is that like I was trying to wasn't necessarily even trying to red pill him because I did not think that that was going to be an easy task based on things, but I needed him. I've known him for 25 years, and I needed him to like at least know about men's issues and stuff because it was becoming a major part of my life. And I
Oh,
remember,
I'm sorry. Is this the one who you had done activism with previously? And that
oh,
was
did you read that post?
no, this was the one I mentioned earlier when you were talking with someone else, and this is who I thought you were talking about, but it wasn't
This is somebody I did a lot of activism with.
specifically.
I don't remember what you were saying earlier. I've been sort of drinking on this stream, but he he's really annoying because he's I've come to realize that he is just a man hater. And he's also really racist against white people, especially, but he also projects his racial insecurities because he's half Asian and he his mother is Asian and his father is a white man.
Oh my
More
God, have you seen The Oedipal Asian?
no.
Okay, Harmful Opinions. The Oedipal Asian. Oedipal, Oedipal Asian.
Okay,
It's.
remind me tomorrow.
I'll send you a link. I'll link
Okay.
it to you.
So the thing is about this guy is that I didn't really realize this, but now I'm starting to realize in his extreme stubbornness. So here's the problem with this guy. And had things not unfolded in this way, I maybe would have never figured it out. But now I think I have a pretty accurate read on what this guy's problem actually is because I've known him for like over 25 years. He has major issues with men and white people, and it's probably mostly just due to his shitbag dad. Because his dad abused him and his sister and his mother when he was very, very, very little. Like we're talking like he was like 3 or 4, and some really bad shit happened. And I'll give him. I don't want to give him credit anymore because I gave him credit for this my whole life. Like I kind of gave him apologies for being a fucked up person because of this because I kind of like always knew about it. But yeah, his dad, really bad things that his dad did in, his early life to him and his sister and his mother. And um because of that, he has been far leftist. I mean, now granted, we all were because we grew up in Seattle. And but he became a far leftist and he decided to be an activist, and he was like kind of a feminist, which but not a full feminist, but maybe a little bit more than I was. And he ended up becoming a veterans activist by random circumstances that happened after we turned 18. And this is where it gets weird because of course, if you're a rational, if you're a civilized person, if you're at all mature, how are you going to be a veterans activist without paying attention to male issues specifically? Like, how are you going to be a veterans activist and a feminist at the same time? That's a very weird thing to try to do.
Yeah, this is the same guy you were talking about before. I remember, and I remember you did post that. I was here to find it.
Yeah, I
No,
posted
but yeah, it's fucked. It's like because it's clearly a men's issue. Veterans like by practically by definition.
yeah, absolutely. And
Obviously not, but practically yes.
yeah, and it gets weirder with him as an individual because his version of veterans activism was coordinating art projects and stuff for veterans to do, which mostly because he's actually not a real artist. He's just not. Like, he's not an artist. He's never worked hard on art. He's never buckled down and got really good at doing something. Because art is hard. It's very hard. If you want to be really good at doing something and you want to be able to teach other people how to do it, you have to spend several years of your life working at it nonstop and not getting paid. Because no one's going to fucking pay you to get good at doing art.
Hmm.
That's not how it works. You do it in your spare time, or if you're fortunate enough, you can get somebody to finance you to do it full time because they believe in you. If you're fucking lucky. He never had that. But what he did have was um he had a certain amount of activist clout for a certain reason. Like people, like I don't want to get into it because I don't want to out myself and him, but people paid attention to him and let him organize stuff for veterans. And so his way of trying to help veterans was to organize big drag shows where veterans did drag, and it was supposed to be like therapeutic for them. Which, okay, he did it 2 years in a row, and a bunch of veterans did it, and they had a bunch of fun, and that's cool. That's fine. And I was involved in each of those shows, and they had fun, and I think that it was a good thing for them because it was a way for them to do something totally different than being in the Iraq War. Um, it was very different, and they felt like they had a new life doing anti-war activism, doing drag. Ta-da! New life. Great. Awesome. But at the same time, that's almost just like a kind of a tip of the iceberg sort of a thing if you're going to actually help these guys, you know?
Yeah, I wonder how many veterans does it actually appeal to? Like,
Oh yeah, 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 that too. That too. And granted, I mean, you don't have to think about that. It's not like if you're going to be a veterans activist, you're not responsible for every single fucking veteran. If you can help 30 of them by organizing some big show where they get to perform and have fun and feel, that's good.
okay,
That's a good thing.
that's a
But
good point. Yeah.
but at the same time, if you're going to call yourself for several years a veterans advocate, you better come up with a new trick. Like after a little while. Like if all you're doing is organizing some fucking drag show and like doing little dances. I mean, he organized me to teach them writing workshops, which I did, but he wasn't teaching them anything. He was giving them the opportunity to perform because he could sort of organize events, but not even really that well. But he was famous, so they did it. But it got to the point where after years and years of him being this half-assed veterans activist that was really just kind of like feminizing veterans and like getting them to do the stuff that he would want to do. And after years of it, they all quit. They didn't want to work with him anymore. After after a few years, they were like, "Dude, this is all about you and your own ego. Like it doesn't seem like you're trying to help us. It seems like you're just doing what you would do anyway if you got the opportunity. Like you want to do drag, you want to perform and do dance numbers, and you're just pulling us along with you." And he didn't have a good response, and so he was like, "Well, if you don't want to do it, see you later." And so they all left, and none of the veterans work with him anymore.
Mm.
And yeah, yeah, and no, and then I stopped working with him too because nothing was going on. Like I was like, okay, well, I was only working with you because you asked and you had projects, and I'm actually an artist, and you had shit for me to do. But now it seems like there's not really anything going on anymore. And then finally, a few years later, I learned about men's rights stuff. Finally, I actually looked at the gender specific problems of men and boys. And I was like, oh, holy shit, this stuff is crazy. And I tried to talk to this guy about it, and he would not listen to me. And what was really funny was that he when I tried to talk to him about family courts and father's rights and stuff, um, his response was to talk about his own family and how no, there's sexism in family courts because everybody expects the woman to take care of the kids because that's sexism. And it's like, well, dude, but that's not sexism. I think it's mostly that the women usually really want to take care of their own kids. The women are attached.
Yeah, the Scandinavian paradox just shuts down so much of that. Like,
So I'm like, well, the women want to take care of their own kids. And he's like, yeah, well, when parents get divorced, it's the woman that's supposed to carry the burden. And it's like, well, yeah, because she wants to. And, you know, also, nobody's forcing them. This isn't society. This isn't systemic sexism. Nobody's forcing them to get a divorce. Not every family is like your shitty family. Like, I'm sorry that you went through that, dude, but like, not everybody has to get divorced anyway. And then his response was like, well, my father was supposed to pay child support, but he usually wouldn't. And I'm like, well, the courts are usually biased in favor of the women. And he was like, well, my dad wouldn't pay child support. And I didn't have it in my repertoire to respond to him with at the time. But I was like, I realized later, well, that's because your mom was a crazy, irresponsible person who didn't ever take her ex-husband to court. Like if she had utilized the court system in her favor, he would have been in jail for not paying those child support. But she didn't do that because I'm still friends with his mother. Like I'm still friends with her. And she was not somebody who would have taken her ex to court. Like she didn't. So it was this whole bias that he had around his family and the fact that like his father treated him like garbage and his mother wasn't very good at dealing with his crappy father. And that was the whole way that he viewed the entire world was based on that. Like his version. Oh, and I want to remind you again, his mother is Asian, his father is white. So he believes this whole white male patriarchy thing. I'm pretty sure because of his own little situation. And he's extended it, all of his own animosity towards hating his white father, to trying to like be a veterans activist, and he refuses to care about male issues. And then when he's confronted with that from me, from someone who's known him for 25 years, he says, "Oh, well, no, fuck men." Like that's his response. So yeah, sorry, this has been bugging me because this happened just in this past week. That was kind of a tangent that was loosely strung together.
no, yeah, but I mean, there's kind of a lot of like little ironies packed into it, with fact that he's like, kind of misandressed, and then like his outlet is like a men's rights issue, it turns out, and just like, oh, just the idea though, the whole like, yeah, like the drag idea is so stupid. Like,
Yeah, it was, looking back on it, I was always kind of suspect of it. Like it was always kind of to me like, oh, okay, my wacky friend's doing some wacky shit and he wants me to be a part of it. Okay, well, I'll do it because I'll do it and I'm needed. There was a lot for me to do, especially the first two shows. Like he was like, "So, I want to do this show and I want to have veterans perform with drag queens and I want to blah blah blah." do you have any good song ideas? Because I don't know. And I came up with like 15 different songs. I was like, well, this would be a good song. Why don't you do Army Dreamers by Kate Bush? Why don't you do anything by Pat Benatar? Why don't you? Yeah, no. I was like, why don't you do What Love Is a Battlefield? Hell Is for Children, blah blah blah. No, and he ended up using out of like maybe 15 songs I suggested, about 7 or 8 of them were used in the first show. Like,
Okay.
yeah, no, and then he asked who would be a good host, and I told him the name of our friend that I thought would be a good host for the show. That's who he got to host it, and the guy did a great fucking job. That first fucking show was like creatively like 50% me, because I was a legit artist and like doing stuff. And so to have all this shit go down, and then to have me eventually question it all and be like, well, what were we really doing? Like, who were we really trying to help? Can we be honest about that? Can we be honest about that? Can we like think about like what did we do? Who did we help? Who were we trying to help? And how can we help these people in the future? And for him to like forsake me and be like, no, fuck you. No, and you know what he literally told me? He told me he blamed it all on Trump. He blamed my behavior now, questioning men's issues, questioning what we were doing as activists for veterans. He now says that the reason I started turning questioning him is just because of Trump.
Well, it's a really convenient explanation because, like the Trump coalition is a bunch of offer bedfellows. It's like the weirdest tattering of people linked together, right? And that's why it's so effective. And that's, typically how the most effective political engines work, is that it's a bunch of people uniting who otherwise wouldn't have anything to do with each other. So I feel like if you're somebody who disagrees with all those people and then you see this common denominator, all of them voted for Trump, I think it lines up perfectly. Yeah, I can see exactly why they think that. I mean, I guess I shouldn't overstate
I
that.
didn't even vote for Trump.
That's really funny. You missed it. You missed the well, you'll have another chance. I'll probably cast 2 votes in my entire life for Trump, and then that's probably gonna be it. Like, I feel like if Trump doesn't fix it, then like there's like literally everything's been tried. No, I was one of those people who never thought I'd vote. Um, Trump's as far left as I'm willing to go, by far. But the other thing that we didn't talk about with this idea is it's like an anti-war drag thing, and I just feel like, I mean, maybe for some veterans I get it. It's not a monolith, but would you really want to do activism? Would you really want to do something that's on the subject matter of, war? I feel like you want to do something that kind of distracts you away from it, something that's kind of different. And I feel like, you talk to veterans, ask them what they want to do and what they're interested in, and then kind of work with what they give you. I imagine maybe they want to go to a shooting
Absolutely.
range. I like over here we have like a shooting range that has a bar attached to it. I feel like maybe some veterans would want to just, drink a pint, shoot at some targets, and then fuck off for the night. And then, you know,
Yeah. Well, no, and for this guy,
it's a lot easier to
the
organize
only
too, right? You don't need a fucking host and a bunch of fucking songs like fucking Pat Benatar and shit. I mean, sorry.
the only thing no, the thing is with this guy is that like he wasn't actually technically a vet, like he didn't go to war. He entered the military so that he could immediately quit the military after boot camp. So he went into the military with the sole intent of becoming a veteran as soon as possible so that he could do anti-war activism. So he went into the military, went through boot camp, and then the next day quit the military to become an activist.
It's like rented valor.
Whole agenda, the whole from the get go. It's and so when he tried to work with actual veterans who had been to war, he was not on the same page with these people. They were duped by him.
Man, this sounds like a Mr. Medicare video waiting to happen, frankly. Like,
Yeah. Man, if you have a direct line with Jim.
Huh?
Wait, I'm not hearing anything. Can you hear me?
Me? I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because, I
Wait,
mean,
what did you say, Jen? No, I didn't catch that part. I was like,
Mr. Medicare's name is Jim.
oh, Jim. I said Jen. I was like, I was weirded out. I was like, who's Jen? Anyway.
No, because I've gotten to the point where I feel like I need to expose this guy as a fraud. Not even necessarily just because I'm vindictive. And it's mostly not because I'm vindictive. It's because if people knew my real name and Googled me a bunch, they could find connections to me working with him on this like veterans activism. But at this point, I no longer feel proud about this veterans activism because I don't think it was really helping the men it was supposed to help, you know? And so it's like I need to sort of like disavow that part of my past if I want to have integrity.
Yeah, it's like there's so few things out there that serve men. So it's kind of a tragedy when you have something that is, you know, I guess I don't want to say a fraud if like maybe it was something that was well intentioned that just didn't quite turn out well or wasn't
Yeah,
honest.
it's like I can explain my involvement with it. Like I can explain why I did it and I thought that I was doing a good thing. But then I tried to tell him, "Hey, I'm starting to second guess what we were doing because like we weren't paying attention to male issues, but we were working with males." And I try to tell him about that and he just doesn't want to hear it. And I'm like, "Well, dude, can you listen to like some of the statistics and some of the arguments?" And he said, "No." And I'm like, "Why not?" And he's like, "Because I don't think you know what you're talking about." And I'm like, "Well, could you maybe listen to what I'm talking about so you can, at that point, judge if you think I know what I'm talking about?" And he said, "No, I don't want to hear it. I'm not interested." And I was like, "Well, then I'm gonna have to tell people that I don't support you. I don't support your activism. I don't think you're a good person if that's how it is." And then he was like, "Well, fine." And I'm like, "Okay, then. I guess that's how it is."
You know,
Isn't
though,
that
I have a friend who
fucked?
I don't support her activism, but I would consider her a good person.
Who?
And, like I'll tell it to her face. I'll be like, I think your activism is misguided. I don't agree with it at all. And like she'll say the same back to me. This was my friend I mentioned earlier, my Wellstone Democrat time capsule friend.
Okay,
And
but I don't think that she's like famous.
no, no, no. And I guess that definitely changes a lot.
Yeah, no, this guy is actually
Yeah,
literally
that's true. He
world
doesn't have
famous.
any real influence, so that definitely is a game changer that we can kind of just
Yeah,
be more
like if
comfortable.
people Google search me, they can find my name on his events that I was like co-coordinating, but he was the head organizer. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
yeah, so it's like I have to let people know that I no longer think that he's a good activist because
And
I
I guess
that
you can also take like donation money too and like speak on the issue, so that kind of also adds to some of the responsibility. I think I can see that aspect of it. I'm kind of thinking out loud.
yeah. Well, because if I didn't say it, I'd be compromising my own integrity. Because eventually people would ask me, "Oh, hey, I see you used to do work with this veteran drag dude. What did you used to do with him?" I'd be like, "Oh, it was cool. It was." And they're like, "Well, I thought you're supposed to be a men's rights activist. Why were you getting veterans to dress up like women and perform? What do you have as an explanation for that?" I'd be like, "Well, because um, uh, you
Wasn't
know,
my idea. Like,
I mean, it seemed cool at the time. Like what can I say? I have to be honest. Like, well, it seemed cool at the time because I wasn't able to empathize with men very well, and I thought that maybe they would want to, perform in dresses. Now the dresses weren't my idea. That was not my idea. That was my friend's idea. I was going along with the show and they did it and they had a fun for a few years, but then after a few years they stopped wanting to work with the guy. And after they stopped wanting to work with the guy, I didn't question it. I never talked to them. I never asked them why they didn't want to work with the guy. Looking back on it, I think it's because he didn't care about their needs as men. He just wanted to do his little thing because he was into doing drag shows. And that's the way I think about it looking back on it. And I think it's a shame because I think we could have done some good for some veterans. And we blew the opportunity because we were not capable of fully emphasizing with male veterans. And I regret that. That's what I'd say now.
Yeah, but like on the positive side of it, I mean, you did say that you had fun for a few years, and they can kind of take that bit of it away from it, and then the fact that you kind of have this great example of like it's a really, really colorful, vivid story, right? That really exemplifies kind of like how activism could be misguided, even if it's well intentioned or if there's some sort of an uncheck or whatever. But like even for the friend you're mentioning, because I know part of it is that you've like reached out to him to say, hey, like if I reveal my name, then you're gonna be linked to this. I'm gonna have to disavow you. Like, I wish that it was easier for people to kind of see these as opportunities to say, yeah, like I guess I can see how even they don't have to even admit to oh I was just doing it for myself. Even to just say, yeah, maybe there's something that we can do that's better. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's just like
Well, and
I guess
that's
I'd
where
like to say
that's
it's
where
blasphemy to me, but I mean, I can't say I'm not guilty of it. Also, who isn't? But
that's where I'm starting to think that maybe it really does have to do with his own personal misinjury problem. Like maybe there was this weird ulterior motive the whole thing of him wanting to, you know, in his head beat out the toxic masculinity in the military by getting veterans to be drag queens. Like, and I don't know that for sure. Like, that's just sort of of a theory that I'm like starting to wonder about now more and more. But like it does kind of seem like that to me a little bit because he was so unwilling to even examine the, you know, like anything besides the idea that getting them to be girly is a good thing. That's the only thing that he has ever really proven is that he wanted to feminize these veterans.
well, and one thing too is there's a really marked difference between like when you try to give someone information and their reaction is kind of like they're indifferent or like not very interested. They say, maybe I'll look into it, like whatever. Versus then they say like, no, like that's just propaganda. That's just bullshit, right? Like there's not really a lot of gray, I don't think, in between those two stances, and it tells you a lot, you know.
Yeah, he wouldn't look into it.
Yeah, like that's not the kind of person that needs, to be enticed into watching it. Like they have something that like they're gonna have to probably motivate themselves into investigating it if it ever happens. Sounds like.
Yeah.
Sorry, I've never met this person, so
Yeah.
weight
Anyhow,
that appropriately.
so I should probably start getting myself ready for bed, and you probably should too.
Yeah, it's 5:30, but Sunday.
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was great to talk to you. You should try to think about the gay acronym for the gay honey badgers.
Yeah, I wrote a bunch of gay related words right here to see what I can make acronyms out of. So I do have that here. So I'll let you know what I come up with. And thanks for inviting me on. Did my volume improve after I switched to this webcam here at all?
Oh, I can't tell.
Oh fuck. Okay. No, it was funny. Like so for the first half, I didn't even realize that I didn't have the right fucking webcam. So I was like talking into a camera that wasn't even on.
Yeah, I noticed when you changed.
Yeah. Anyway. I got those learning experiences. This is the worst it'll ever be. So
All right. Well, thanks everybody in the chat. Thanks a whole bunch for the super chat donations. Thomas Miller, you're a rock star. I hope to be able to get um, in. This sounds weird, but I learned that Google takes a lot of your money from super chat donations, more than I thought that they did. So if anybody is interested in maybe ever in the future paying me directly through PayPal, tweet me because the only reason I don't have a PayPal link is because it reveals my real name if people pay it to me. And so I don't really like doxing myself that much at the moment. So, but if you want to like tweet at me, if you feel inclined to donate money to me so I can keep speaking about these issues and organizing with my ever broadening brushstroke of gay men that are also interested in these issues, like Derek here and the Liberal Hammer and Barry Valen and other people who want to come on and, you know, get better at talking about these issues and bringing them to a broader cultural scope so that maybe eventually we can make an impact. Um, yes, Teamaker, you can certainly DM me. And yeah, you have given me money in the past, so you are more than welcome, Teamaker. And I think I follow you on Twitter. If not, tweet at me. Um, but yeah. Ultimately, things are getting a little bit weird in terms of finances because the ads have not been showing up on my videos, so I don't know how much money I'm going to have this next month. And things have been weird in my personal life, and it's been hard for me to concentrate on videos. So if my video quality hasn't been all that great, there's been a reason for that. Um, but yeah, thanks again for joining me, Derek.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, and I'm usually near my computer, so if I'll try to get a better microphone also.
Okay, yeah, you were a really great guest. Actually, I think people really enjoyed hearing from you. And I don't know when we're going to do this again, but I'll keep people updated. Follow me on Twitter at Prince of Queens with 2 S's at the end. And thanks everybody, and good night. Bye.